What finally made you realize, yep, that person is definitely nuts? We were newly married and my husband worked at an office and had one fun guy that we liked to hang out with. Let's call him Steve. Well, Steve lived at home and asked if he could rent out our basement apartment. It seemed like a great idea to us because of the extra money, and he was a fun guy. And it was all good for a week or so. Then my husband had to leave to a different city for training. So, Steve thought he had to be the man of the house. I was a busy trauma nurse on call a lot, and I was hardly home. But when I was, Steve would barbecue dinner and be really miffed if I didn't want it. That's just one example, but that kind of behavior escalated. My husband was only gone for 3 days, came back, and Steve's behavior kept escalating. One night I was going out for girls' night and my husband had a big black tie event with his company. Steve was not as high up in the company and was planning on staying home. This was back in the late 90s, so I'm not entirely sure how he found out where I was with my gang of girls at a downtown bar. About midnight all of a sudden, he shows up and tells me it's time to go, it's late. My table of work friends became totally silent and everyone was staring at me. Also, Steve was wearing all of my husband's clothes, from jacket to shirt pants, socks, and shoes. Fricking bizarre. I sent him away, but the girls' night was pretty awkward after that. He wasn't home when I got home, thank God. I told my husband everything when he finally got home and we went to bed. The next morning we heard thumps and a lot of loud voices. Came out of our bedroom and he was moving out and had a bunch of his high school friends there. They were moving him out but also taking all of our stuff. Laundry soap and food included. Steve saw we were up and marched over and gave us a lecture about how crappy we were and how we won't fare well without him, and then he finally left. I know he was let go at work later on and I actually feel a bit bad. He probably had some sort of mental illness, but still, very creepy experience. My ex calling the cops on me because she thought I was trying to, quote, poison her. I bought salted butter instead of unsalted. Was she a snail? They believed me right away. Thankfully, they had their heads on straight. That wasn't the first time she called the cops on me for something stupid, but luckily, I got my act together and it was the last. I was a personal assistant for a woman who was extremely, shall we say, lawyer-happy, meaning she always was looking for ways to sue people. I accompanied her while she picked up her child from daycare one day. She parked in a no-parking zone that most parents use as a car line to pick up their older kids. And a dad of another child came over and calmly asked her to please move her car so that the car line could keep moving. He was completely cool about it, but my boss ranted all the way home about how the man made her feel unsafe and threatened and that she'd be contacting her lawyer so she could sue him for emotional distress. No clue how she went about that since I quit shortly after. And yes, she threatened to sue me when I quit. Ha ha ha, there's that last line we were waiting for. It's surreal when you start to see the patterns of how these people react to any negative outcome in their lives. I knew a poor soul whose unfortunate choices and disastrous personal skills led to him becoming quite isolated like this, and whether he was losing friend groups, memberships in social clubs that he'd failed to pay the fees for, or jobs, he had one standard recourse: claim discrimination. It was never specified what was being discriminated against. It was never surprising and always easily disproved. It was actually pretty sad, to be honest. I had a coworker who regularly talked about how so many of her friends screwed her over in the past. At first, I believed her and felt bad until she told us what her latest ex-friend did. After basically calling him every name in the book, of course. She and her husband decided one day to replace their furniture. This was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and since they didn't have a truck to move their stuff, they texted their friend to see if said friend could help them, along with that friend's truck. The friend said no, they couldn't do that, they were busy that day. The crazy witch showed up at his house and flipped out when she saw that he was home relaxing, and that's how entitled she thought she was to his vehicle and his time. She screamed about every single thing that she'd ever done for him, petty stuff like, "I bought you a soda when you forgot your wallet," stuff like that. The cops had to be called. From then on out, I was careful not to accept any favors from her because I was 98% sure the only reason she'd ever do such a nice thing is to throw it back in your face when you tell her no. Like, she used to give one of our coworkers a ride home, and I witnessed this coworker on multiple occasions offer gas money to pay for her lunch and stuff as a thank you, and she always declined with, "I'm going that way anyway." Until one day that coworker enraged her, so she ran around telling everyone that they were a mooch and never once paid for gas money. I don't know, maybe this is more manipulative than crazy, but she was always so miserable, so it's not like she was even getting what she wanted at the end of the day, so I consider it some kind of crazy. Months after going on a single date with a woman, she calls me on Christmas Eve while I'm at work to introduce me to her family over the phone as her boyfriend. The one date we had was a dinner at a restaurant. She didn't order anything, just kept eating my fries, then watching TV back at her place. Nothing physical happened, and the date ended with a handshake. When I responded that we weren't a couple, she even started freaking out and crying about how horrible I was for breaking up with her on Christmas Eve. My husband's cousin is the only female in the family that's around my age, so when we used to go to family functions, I tended to hang out with her. Our friendship blossomed, and she was who I considered to be my best friend. We both had 3 kids, and they all loved each other, so we just spent a lot of time together. My husband always told me she was crazy, that she'd turn on me, but I just thought they grew up together and had some kind of weird rivalry thing going on in the family. Her ex-husband hated her. Court cases for custody were happening all the time. It was nasty. They weren't allowed to be in the same room together per court order even. I only heard her side of the story, so I just kind of assumed it was him that was horrible. Fast forward a few years, she was remarried and had a new baby with her new husband. She's an interior decorator and had always been struggling financially. But somehow, all of a sudden, she was buying all the things. New iPods for all the kids, including mine, a gaming laptop for her oldest, furniture, electronics, she pays a year of rent so she won't have to think about it. She'd gotten a new big client who gave her an expense account to decorate his multi-million-dollar home. She spent about $200,000 of his money and was sued later. Well, I was over there because I was now a approved supervisor for the supervised visitation her ex-husband imposed through the court. She started screaming at her new husband for not loading the dishwasher correctly and pushed him fully with real force down the stairs. He somehow manages to be okay, but she doesn't stop, runs after him with clear plans to attack. The guy has to literally flee his own home. I packed up the 3 older kids and my kids and got out of there. I didn't report it because she guilted me into thinking that she had postpartum depression and would be fine. One Valentine's Day, she decides she wants to have a party for the kids. The time didn't work out for me, so I told her we couldn't attend. She lost her mind and called me every name she could think of. She took things I'd said to her in confidence and told our whole family. I got pages and pages of scathing emails. I was crushed. 5 years later, she remarried again and had 2 more babies with the new guy. She called the Department of Child and Families on her 15-year-old son, claiming he had attacked her 2-year-old daughter. She had 0 evidence, but decided she was acting weird and that this must have been what happened. After a heated altercation with the new guy, where police were called, she now has lost custody of all 6 kids and begs me to come to court to be a character witness. Oy. So I was heading out to get groceries with my roommates, and on our way out of the house, we found a homeless man digging through our trash. It was slightly surprising since it's not every day that you find a man looking for empties under your porch. We decided he was pretty harmless since all he was doing was looking around. Plus, he was actually going out of his way to clean up our admittedly disgusting parking lot of not just bottles and cans, he was sweeping the dirt, weeds, and our neighbors' trash that they left unprotected under their porch, which was now swarming with wasps and eaten by animals. We got him some empties from inside, gave him a cold drink, locked the door, and left to get groceries. When we got back, we found that he was still there after an hour and still cleaning our parking lot. We were amazed and grateful, so we struck up a conversation. He seemed like a normal guy. He used to be a business owner. He fixed roofs for a living. He made decent money before he was homeless. He used to be married and he has kids. Unfortunately, his life kind of spiraled after he got mixed up in crystal use. We sort of thought of him as a normal dude who got mixed up with the wrong substance and then got screwed over by the system. That is, until he mentioned that the construction on our main street was a plot by the city to find the Templar's treasure, that he himself was a Templar descendant, and when he claimed that I specifically was the unknowing descendant of Templars. We let him talk and tell us stories for 2 hours before he stopped. It was so wild. It's my favorite story to tell. He was great though. Even after he finished his medicated rambling, he proceeded to finish cleaning our parking lot, and he offered to do it again for cheap if we needed it. Frank, if you ever read this, we love you. I know that I talk way too much about Always Sunny in Philadelphia on this channel for the 5% of the people who've seen the show, but this character could literally just be Frank Reynolds from that same show. He even has the same name. Love it. When they bought a dead bird into a Subway sandwich place and tried to barter it for a sub. This was years ago, so to my best recollection, here's the long version. I was eating at my local Subway sandwiches, a woman comes to the counter, pulls a dead bird from her coat and asks what kind of sub she can get for the bird. Everyone turns and watches as the teenager behind the counter realizes what's going on. He starts yelling that she needs to leave because a dead bird is an obvious health code violation. She gets angry that he's not even willing to hear her out and storms off mumbling and swearing under her breath. There was some girl I met during my teenage years. We chatted for like 30 seconds and exchanged phone numbers. Never met after that, only texted. We did that back and forth for a few months and then I went to college. Then she finally drops "I love you" to me. Obviously, I feel weird about the whole situation because we've only exchanged like 20 to 30 texts, and all of it was small talk. I don't know how to respond to that. The next text a few hours later was, "Brett, I'm pregnant." Like, what? At this point, my red flag detector is going off, so I try to cut off the relationship by texting, "Okay," and then ghosting. A minute later, "I think it's yours. If you don't come back to take care of me, I'm going to Control-Alt-Delete myself." Well, I just deleted all our messages after that. I still wonder to this day if she was legitimately crazy or if she just got me confused with someone she actually slept with. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Okay, so I'm a nurse, so this is kind of a daily occurrence for me. Especially when you're working in the emergency department and dealing with people who've just walked through the door and you're trying to ascertain whether they're orientated or not. I had too many to list, but one was an elderly mother and her middle-aged son. They seemed completely normal, they often do at first. The mother was getting admitted and the son was getting ready to go home. He pulled me aside and told me his mother likes to spit in a jar on Friday evenings after she watches the news, and if it would be okay for her to do that while in the hospital. Kinda weird, but whatever, she's not hurting anyone. So I said I don't see why not. I'll get her a paper cup or something and she can spit in that tonight after the news. It was a Friday. "Oh no," he said, "into this jar." He then presented me with what looked like a gross old pickle jar, about a quarter full of spit. It was wrong on so many levels. Let's just say I got a real Norman Bates vibe from those two. Also, outside of work, I went to a house party one New Year's Eve when I was young. There was a chick there that I'd met before and she seemed really cool. They often do at first. Everyone was having fun, but she decided she wanted to go out to a club. She basically throws a tantrum until we all just give in and decided to drive her to this stupid club. She calmed down in the car until we got about halfway there and she just went berserk, saying she doesn't want to go to a club. Why couldn't we have stayed home? Why does she always have to do what everyone else wants? Why are we forcing her to go out when she doesn't want to? Long story short, we turned around and went back home. Once there, she tried to slash the tires of the car, tried to run me and my friend over with her car, and finally ended up crying in the fetal position in the gutter because nobody took her seriously. Right. Talking to this one girl I don't know that well, she says, "I'm an only child." I say, "Oh really? I could never imagine being an only child. What's that like?"
"Oh, it gets lonely sometimes, but you get used to it, you know?"
So fast forward a few minutes. I say, "I really like your bracelet."
"Oh, thanks. My sister gave it to me."
In my head, I'm going, okay, something doesn't add up. I'll just ask her. "Oh, really? I thought you were an only child."
"Oh, no way. I have 7 siblings."
Yep, compulsive liar right there. A former friend of mine was extremely clingy and threatened to not be alive anymore over little things like me not wanting to talk to her 24/7. I called her bluff and I knew she'd never do it. It was just her standard manipulation tool. One day, a conversation about a friend of mine with testicular cancer came up. Turns out she tried to screw him, but he rejected her. She told me that she sincerely wishes that he'd succumb to the cancer. That was the last couple of straws for me. Boyfriend's ex-girlfriend shows up at his house and wants to get back together with him. He declines, of course. He tries to leave for work. She gets in the car with him. He repeatedly tells her to get out, but she refuses. My boyfriend's a pretty chill guy. He doesn't get mad easily. She then physically attacked him while he was driving to work. Luckily, the cops were around the corner and they arrested her. The next day, she called my boyfriend crying on the phone and apologizing for everything. Then the day after that, she called my boyfriend, screaming at him, saying that it's all his fault that she's in jail. After all of this, she left us alone. Thank goodness. I think all we can really do here is hope like hell that she stopped contacting you because she actually went and got professional help. She clearly had some kind of occasional awareness that she was acting out. I worked at a gas station when I was in high school. Every day around the same time for a couple of months, this really cute guy would come in for the restroom and then head out. Eventually, I started being friendlier and he'd stop a second to chat, and eventually he'd ask if I'd like to hear a poem. I'd gush about how great it was and he'd go on his way. The guy was gorgeous, so that clouded my judgment. His poems made no sense and got weirder as time went on. My coworker and best friend urged me to stop being so friendly as he gave her the creeps. I, being 15 and boy crazy, ignored her. This went on for months until one day he ran in with his hair in pigtails and cat-kind of whiskers drawn on his face and locked himself in the bathroom for over an hour. I knocked on the door several times and heard him talking as if on the phone. This was pre-cell phones being normal, I just had a pager. Finally, he busted out, clutching a half-dissolved urinal cake up to his ear and saying, "Someone left me a clue. I finally found it. Farewell." And he ran down the street and we never saw him again. Yeah, so not an eccentric poet. My brother, who's a talented guitar player, told his friends that he got an interview to teach at Juilliard. A week or so later, he posted a video from my mum's living room. He sleeps on her office floor. He was rambling about the interview and that he wasn't offered the job because he used too much profanity. I asked my mum if he had taken any cross-country flights lately, since she would have noticed this mole person mysteriously missing from her home. If he'd in fact been offered an interview. Nope, he was here all week. Why? Yep, that kid had lost it. Oh, and my ex-husband accused me of sleeping with the Deftones. All of them. I'm still not sure what he thought happened, if it was a one-off big spectator event or if I did it systematically. Well, he's on wife number 3 now and is no longer my problem. My flatmate's ex got drunk and mad with him for reasons unknown. She threw up into a bucket, then stared at him in the eye and tipped it all over the lounge floor. Then she tried to throw pizza she had chewed up and spat into her hand, missed him and hit somebody else. Then she put her hand through our window, as in she literally broke the window by shoving her arm through it, and smeared the blood all over the walls and floor, all while saying pathetic stuff about him and being generally awful. This was all in the space of about an hour at 11 a.m. The relationship didn't last long after that. She continued to blackmail him after they'd broken up though. Definitely some issues there, I think. When my smackhead college roommate tried to annoy the girls living in the dorm next door to us by just banging his head on the wall constantly to make them angry with the noise. I still don't even know why he hated them. He just did. My ex-girlfriend legally changed her surname to mine through deed poll after a 1.5-year relationship. Look, I kinda knew they were crazy beforehand, but when my son's mum sent a text message to me threatening to kill my son while he was with her, I now have full custody. When he told me he was a werewolf. When she literally tried to break my wrist at a party for not high-fiving her. Alcohol is like a steroid for crazy. Wrist hurts just thinking about it. I think she just did jujitsu or something because damn. Started digging bits of silver foil out of the tarmac on the side of the road. He had been perfectly sane a few days earlier, and I got to watch his descent, not really realizing what I was viewing until that point. This was in India, and he was Indian but hung out mostly with Westerners, so we'd often talk about spiritual matters. I noticed that these spiritual conversations would get more and more esoteric until I couldn't really get what he was talking about, but I still didn't twig. The day before I found him digging up that silver foil, why is it always foil, I met him on the way home from a bar. He was definitely weird then, properly creepy, and that was when I first realized he had gone a bit mad. He started another long rambling conversation with me again, none of which made sense. It was just the two of us talking beneath a tree on a dark road with nobody else around. He handed me an invisible telephone and told me my mother wanted to talk to me, so I played along, because I was kinda wasted. Then his eyes got wide and he shook his head, placed one hand on each side of my face and said, "No, you never talk to your mother ever again." I was frightened and went home. A couple of days later, he disappeared as he was taken away to the mental hospital and he only turned up again a few weeks later, shaven-headed. This happened every now and again, apparently. Nowadays, I can spot the signs a lot faster when people are skirting around the borders of madness, and I make damn sure to back off a bit so I don't end up in a position like that again. I had an extremely clingy friend that texted and tried to call me 50 million times a day. Well, I was having a really crappy day and I wasn't in the mood to converse with her at all, and just ignored her. She called the police and told them that she thought I'd tried to self-delete. So that was fun. How to make a bad day a million times worse. It's nice that she cared, not nice that that's how she went about it. There are quite a few more steps that should occur between someone not answering the phone and ringing the police with that theory. I was at a Halloween party several years ago with a secondary or tertiary friend group. You know, the kind. I was kind of friends with some of them and I only barely knew others. But it was a costume party and I didn't have anywhere else to be, so I went. There was a guy who was near to the center of the group that was always a bit screwy. Everyone called him Prison James because he'd been to prison. I'd run into him a few years before when I was in my teens and he offered me $20 to show him my chest. He was at least 20 at the time. Real class act, James. Well, during the party, he pulled out a loaded frickin' piece and started waving it around, saying he could end it all right there or some stuff like that. 2 guys managed to get it off him. Now he was angry and running around the house yelling. A 3rd guy stepped in and decided to break down the weapon. So like 1 guy has all the bullets and 1 guy gets the actual, thing. Someone else took the clip. Nobody else reacted. They were just like, welp, typical Prison James behavior right there. So that's the day I decided that entire circle was bat crap crazy. A co-worker of mine was in his basement apartment one night, and after coming out of the bathroom, one of his ex-girlfriends was standing in the hallway just staring at him. He immediately told her to get the frick out, as any person would. She followed it up by pulling out a steak knife from her back pocket and swinging it around, making some pretty crazy statements. He managed to get the knife off her, and then she pulled out another one. This girl had a pack of steak knives in her pocket. She then proceeded to shank herself in the neck. I think that's when he realized she was pretty off. She survived. They're dating now. Godspeed to that guy. That's when I realized my coworker was also crazy. What is a time your pet has genuinely surprised you? My cat once pounced on a poisonous snake that was moving towards my son. He pinned it down until one of us got to him and then let the snake go. Kitty got some extra nice tuna fish that night. As some people have commented, snakes are venomous, not poisonous. Whatever. Gary doesn't care, he just saw something he could pounce on. I was doing some electrical work in an empty 2-story industrial building. I brought my dog along because she likes running around, exploring, and chasing mice. Every so often she'd take a break and come visit me working. I only had one electrical part left, a nut-like wire tensioner, and I showed it to my dog randomly and said, "Go get it." The pile of these parts was downstairs in a 20 to 30 room building on a pile of gear. My dog, who is crappy at even playing fetch, shows up 5 minutes later having identified the part I asked her for and bought me a new one. Now, at dinner parties, I always try to find 2 of the same objects and hide them somewhere in the house, and she always amazes guests by showing up with what I asked her. I've hired people who I send for a wrench and 2 hours later they return with pliers. Does your dog have a criminal record? And if not, does he have an updated resume? My favorite cat, now passed, had many strange habits. He played with water in the sink, jumped in the shower when you were taking too long, jumped and left paw prints on the top of our walls, etc. But the one time he truly surprised me was nearly 16 years ago. I walked into my bedroom and found my wife crying and holding the cat. I asked her what was wrong and she started to explain. I was tired and decided to take a nap. Butterscotch jumped up, curled up with me, and then started kneading my stomach. I didn't understand what she was getting at and told her so. She said that the last time he did that was when she was pregnant with our first daughter 5 years earlier, and he never did it since. She was convinced that he was trying to tell her that she was pregnant again, and she was crying because she was so happy. She had even made an appointment to get a pregnancy check. Turns out, 4 weeks pregnant. I miss that cat. He made it to over 20 years. Cats, man. They can be really nasty little mean buttholes, but there are several in this collection of stories that exemplify what the best of them can be like. Related, the whole recording session is making me want to go and buy a whole bunch of pets. I posted this story a few months ago, but it's pretty typical of the interactions between my dog, a Corgi Sheltie mix, and me. After 8 years of things like this, there's very little that surprises me with him. A while back, I was playing fetch with him out at the lake. He was starting to get bored, so after getting the ball one time, he carried it with him behind a tree, dropped it, and then trotted back to me as if there had been no ball in the first place. I wanted to see what he'd do next, so I got the ball and threw it again. This time, he ran and got it, then proceeded to jump in the lake, swim out 20 to 30 feet, drop the ball in the water, and swim back. Needless to say, this ended our game of fetch. We had a Jack Russell who would just play reverse fetch. My daughter had really proudly just taught him to fetch when he took the ball, trotted over to the patio railing, we live on the 3rd floor apartment, and dropped it over the side. I went down to go get it, gave it back to him, and he went right back out and dropped it over the edge again. I live next to a mental health facility. I never really bought the idea that dogs could sense things in people, but when I got my Weimaraner and took him for walks around the hospital grounds, he would act completely different when someone with a mental illness approached us versus a staff member. Even if they were 100 feet away, he would stop playing and stand by my side if they were a patient. Weird. I had severe depression problems as a teen, and some days I wouldn't get out of bed. My lab at the time would come up, stick his nose under my arm, flip it up so it lands on him, or would bring his toy and drop it into my lap. The dog knew when I wasn't doing well, and did everything he could to make me active. We used to have a kitty that would go to work with my dad. He worked in a grain terminal where farmers would bring in their grain and they would put it onto train cars and send it out to wherever, mills, etc. While Dad was working, the kitty would be running around the place chasing mice or playing with the farmers when they came in. The phone rang off the hook around there. Almost every few minutes the phone would ring and someone would answer it. If the secretary was out, one of the other guys would have to come in and answer it. I was just a young lad back then, but one day the phone was ringing and nobody was coming to answer it. The cat jumps onto the desk, flips the receiver off the base station so it's upside down, speaker and mic facing up, and starts meowing into it. I swear the farmer must have been confused as heck. When I asked my dad about it, he said that the kitty will let it ring 4 times before she hops up and answers it. I was blown away. Was a damn good kitty. I had a male cat named Stinky. In all the time I had him, approximately 5 years, he had never slept in the bed with my wife and me. I go on a business trip once, and the first day I'm gone, my wife is laying in bed reading, and Stinky actually jumps on the bed with her, and this is crucial, in the spot where I usually sleep. My wife is surprised, but keeps on reading. Stinky proceeds to roll onto his back and extend his wiener, making sure that the wife sees it. In conclusion, my cat waited for me to go out into town and try to seduce my wife. I think he owes you a dead bird for that one. Hamsters. Mum had a litter, and after they went from little pinkies to little fuzzies, they would take turns in the wheel, 2 to 3 side by side, getting up speed, while the others would line up, yes, line up outside, and one by one grab onto the rim of the wheel, get lifted up and let go, to get flung to the other side of the cage, then get back in line. They also traded up runners from time to time. Some hamster democratic process. Some hamster democratic process. There's an analogy for America somewhere in here. Hamsters are funny little weirdos as is, and the prospect of a flying hamster circus only makes them seem cuter. Bless. We have a cat that never played with toys. She would watch the other cats play, and sometimes try to do it herself, but couldn't wrap her mind around bat the ball and chase it. She was pretty dumb in general. If you put a clear glass on the floor with milk in it, she would swat at the sides while the other cats would reach their paws in the top and get the milk. So I got a laser pointer and was playing with the other cats. After a while, the dumb cat showed up and I thought that maybe she would have fun with the red dot since she didn't understand other toys. I zipped the dot around the floor. She looked at it, followed it with her eyes, then walked to my feet, reached up and put her paw over the end of the pointer, blocking the laser. I have no idea if she understood or if it was a coincidence, but it really surprised me. You have a cat nerd. Doesn't really get sports or bars, but great with high-energy physics problems. Maybe your cat was just really smart instead of really dumb. Sees ball, doesn't understand why hitting a ball over and over is fun. Sees laser dot, goes to source and stops it. Sees milk glass, tries to spill it over rather than drink it little by little. Mr. Energy Flow might be onto something here. Oh, my cat does the same thing. He'll first put his head in the glass, and if he can't get any water, he'll just knock it over. A glass is his first priority. He will skip his full bowl, walk right by it, to get on the computer desk and drink my near-empty water glass. After the third keyboard got destroyed, I replaced his bowl with a glass. Apparently that's all he wanted. One of my cats kept meowing. I checked her food bowl, water bowl, litter box, and general health, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I gave her plenty of attention and playtime and went back to working on some homework. She continued meowing. Finally, I threw my arms up and to the side in frustration and said, "What do you want?" She looked me dead in the eye, raised her paws in the exact same exasperated way I had my arms raised. She was literally standing upright on 2 legs, holding out her paws like I had my arms, and made her best attempt to copy my speech by saying, "Meow," before scuttling away. I was speechless and stunned for a good minute and relatively freaked out. I'd never had a cat mimic my behavior before. She's never done it again, despite my attempts to encourage it. My cat Dusty has a small cat door to go outside in the summer. Ducks regularly come into my yard and I feed them bread sometimes. Well, Dusty one night grabs the loaf of bread off the counter, takes it out of the cat door, then hides the bread in the bushes. He takes a piece of bread and puts it in an open area and waits in nearby bushes. He was trying to bait ducks with bread. Frickin' genius cat. I had to leave my dog alone for a couple of hours in the morning and the night before he had eaten something that didn't quite agree with his stomach. When I came back, he didn't greet me like he usually does, so I was suspicious. He couldn't get out of the house to poop, so he had to poop in the middle of the living room. I didn't yell at him, no point now, plus he knew it was wrong and he just couldn't hold it in. He hasn't done this since he was a pup 3 years ago. Well, I go to investigate and see that there's been a disturbance in the bathroom. The rug in front of the toilet was all thrown around and the toilet seat had scratches on it. I think my dog, after the many times he had seen me poop with the door open, decided that he needed to go there but didn't know how to use it, so he scratched the seat while trying and threw the rug around in anger of not being able to do it. Then he pooped on the carpet as a last resort. I had a lovable golden retriever whose name was Duncan. Like many dogs, he had a supreme sense of emotions of my family members, comforting us when we were sad, jumping around with us when we were excited. He really sensed how we felt and adapted to the situation, but lots of dogs do that, so that's not the surprising part. He had a sensitive stomach and often threw up despite our best efforts to feed him carefully and beneficially. My mom never scolded him for throwing up in the house, but he still felt extremely guilty whenever it happened. One day, he slowly came up next to me as I was doing homework. Glancing at him, I saw he had his mouth jammed shut and refused to open it for me. When I got out of my chair, he politely led me to the back door, signaling that he had to go outside. I quickly let him out, and after walking all the way across our deck and down the steps into the grass, he let loose the largest amount of vomit I've ever seen. He spent a solid 30 seconds emptying the contents of his stomach into a neat pile on our yard. Conclusion: after patiently storing vomit in his mouth for at least a full minute, my faithful dog politely led me outside, across our deck and into our yard, where he emptied all of his stomach contents in a neat pile so that my mom wouldn't have to clean up after him. It's been said many times by many people, but we don't deserve doggos. No other animal will put themselves through that amount of discomfort just to make us happy. When I was a kid, I had a cat that was a little odd. One day, my mother caught 2 teenage boys tormenting my cat along an alley that went along outside our house. She thought they were trying to cut the cat's tail off with a craft knife, so ran and kicked one of the boys away. My cat went to run off, but when it saw that the boy with the knife had turned on my mother, it went nuts, launched itself at the boy's face, and tore it to bits in a frenzy. Never heard of cats doing that kind of thing. I got my cat in college. He was very young when I got him, and I was pretty much the only human he interacted with, so he was very attached to me. He loved to snuggle and purr and was never a biter. Anyway, I happened to have an eating disorder at the time, and I would weigh myself several times a day. The weight would not be what I wanted, and I would get upset. After a few weeks of having the cat, I went to go step on the scale. As I tried to step on it, the cat launched himself across the bed, tackled my calf, and bit down very hard. He never did things like that. After that episode, he proceeded to bite and scratch me whenever I went for the scale. Apparently, his cat logic was, human girl steps on box, gets sad, and cries. I must make sure she never steps on the box. Funny thing is, this actually helped me get treatment for the problem. I was like, crap, even my cat knows I have a big problem here. I should get help. Anyway, today I'm happy and healthy. Thanks to the best cat ever. 6 years ago, one of our 2 cats died, and my sister insisted that we cremate it and keep it in an urn. As soon as they'd placed the urn into a cabinet we had at home, our other cat sat in front of it making meowing noises that I'd never heard coming from a cat before, for like 20 minutes. I couldn't believe that our cat knew it was her sister and mourned like any other human. It was quite astonishing, really. When I was in high school, my family and I went to the feed store to get some supplies for our lawn and gardens. While there, we saw a brown bunny that someone had dropped off to sell. I begged and begged my dad for this rabbit. He said no. I came home a day or 2 later, and there is the rabbit sitting in its cage on our coffee table. Apparently my dad broke down and bought him. He was a great rabbit and very unusual in the fact that he thought he was a dog, always running around your feet when you came home. He would sit on the couch with my dad and eat ginger snaps and drink coffee with him. He always knew when you were sick. On the couch, he would jump up and just rest on your chest. We had him for 10 years and he died this past spring. My dad trained guard dogs in Vietnam and I have never seen him cry, not even at his own mother's funeral. But I'll be damned if that rabbit didn't affect my dad in such a way that he cried and said he lost a best friend. I was laying on my couch and wanted to turn the light off, but the switch was on the other side of the room. Within 10 seconds of me thinking that I wanted the light off, I crap you not, my cat comes flying out of nowhere, jumps and flicks the switch off. It was the craziest freaking thing, and to this day I wish someone had witnessed that with me. It was amazing. My cat is amazing. You know how outdoor cats will sometimes bring you presents like dead birds and mice? Well, our outdoor kitty brought us a ham and cheese sandwich. I have no idea where he found it. We had a golden retriever that thrived on escaping. Whenever the door was even a bit ajar, he'd take off and have day-long excursions, only to come back hours later with a huge grin on his face, and usually filthy from adventuring in the surrounding creeks and woodlands. If you ran after him, he'd troll the crap out of you and play chase games for up to an hour before letting you put the leash back on. If you happened to find him while you were driving, he'd readily jump in the car with you, no hassle. One morning as my parents were getting ready for work, the dog bolted. They both had meetings to get to and would only be gone for a few hours, and we knew he'd be back in the afternoon, so they left. When we came back, we circled the neighborhood looking for him and found him taking center point in the street with a pack of 5 other neighborhood dogs traipsing after him. Fricker had formed a gang and he was the gosh darned alpha. We pull up and scream for him to get in the car, which he readily does with a huge grin on his face as he slobbers and licks everyone. Business clothes be damned. Then we take the long way around the neighborhood to get back to our house. By the time we do, all 5 of the dogs we just saw with him were waiting for him obediently in our driveway. We shooed them away. Later we found out from the neighbors that our dog had run from yard to yard and freed the fenced-in dogs by nosing up the latches. Once this started, other neighbors had been warning each other of the mass exodus by telephone, but our dog was too fast. People then had to replace the latches with locks since our dog had taught the others how to jailbreak. The Great Dog Escape may go down as one of my favorite stories in this thread, and the fact that his liberated brethren gathered outside his house to protest his imprisonment is the cherry on the cake. I had a house rabbit named Sirius that my parents rescued. She was going to be put down because her owners got evicted. She loved reggae and bassy music, and she used to lie still and purr along to it. She lived in my room for 6 months, and whenever I came home from school, she'd jump up and sit on my feet. She used to have these little wild fits and run around and do cartwheels. Then she died when my family was away on holiday, and the kennel kept her in the freezer. I have a big fat cat named Pete. The day my son came home from hospital, Pete decided that he was in charge of the baby. He would lay with him for hours, and as soon as the baby would start to stir, Pete would immediately come and find us. Pete would soothe, clean, and be the best babysitter in the world. 5 years later, our cat still follows my son everywhere he goes. One more about Pete. My husband deployed for 15 months. The second he walked in the door, Pete ran like a gosh darn tiger and jumped straight for him. He refused to leave my hubby's lap for the next 8 hours. In conclusion, my cat likes boys more than girls. I'd been overly affectionate with my guinea pig for months, but he bitterly ignored me. Recently, I decided to ignore him, seeing as my loving nature doesn't agree with him. Now the little butthole won't leave me alone, licks my face, my toes, popcorning, weird jump thing guinea pigs do when they're ecstatic, for joy when he sees me. God, he is such a butthole. Oh man, when my rats popcorn, it is so cute. It happens when they're playing, or if I give them something really tasty, like if I hand them a piece of chocolate. They cautiously take it with their mouth, then adjust the position of the food in their mouth to carry it easier, then bounce under the furniture to go and eat it. Their eyes get wider when they eat something tasty like, om nom nom, oh wait, oh god, oh this is delicious. And they will also play a game with me, where they hop up on my back and walk around my hands and knees and stop by different furniture in the room. They will then hop off me onto the bed, desk, or whatever, sniff around, and then hop back on my shoulder to go somewhere else. This repeats several times before they get bored. My dog is always the star at the dog beaches. He will literally get every dog there playing in one big group. The other people now know him as the party starter. One day, there was this really old, giant wolfhound of some kind, just a generally huge, shaggy dog, Mutt. My dog runs over and the owner warned me that her dog was really old and grumpy, so I tried to keep my little party animal away from the big dog. Well, my dog won't give up and keeps going over and trying to wrestle with this gigantic old dog, and eventually the old guy breaks down and started playing with my dog. I'm all laughing because this huge dog is literally putting my whole tiny dog in his mouth, and they're generally just wrestling away and having the best time. And I look up and the other dog's owner is crying. "What's wrong?" I ask. "My dog has cancer and is getting put down shortly, and this is the happiest I've seen her in months." While all the other dogs were staying away from the big grump, my dog just rolls up to give this old timer one last tussle in the sand. It was truthfully one of the most amazing moments I've ever been a part of. It's something so simple, but I went outside with my girlfriend and saw one of my cats across the street that was excited to see us. He decided to make his way over to us, and since we lived on a big and busy street, I nervously watched as he approached the curb, but to my amazement, he turned his head to the left, then checked to his right, and happily pranced across the street. That little butthole just looked both ways before crossing. It was small, but it surprised me. My yellow lab would get offended at you if you talked crap about him or scolded him unjustly. Then you had to apologize to him to get him to quit sulking. As in, you actually had to go up to him and say, "I'm sorry, Tucker," and pet him, or he would refuse to look at you. My dad would never apologize to the dog, so the dog would stay mad at him for days. It was hilarious. Once when I was a kid, I was sitting on my bed reading a book. My cat was in the room, and I had the door closed. The cat decided she wanted to get out of the room and started standing by the door and meowing to get my attention. I wanted to finish the chapter of the book off, so I just ignored her. She decided that wasn't good enough, so she jumped on the dresser right next to the door and immediately pushed a cup full of spare change off the dresser. She then stood stock still and stared at me. When I didn't get up and let her out, she pushed my watch off the dresser and stared at me again. She was basically saying to me, "I know this bothers you, and I'm going to keep knocking your crap on the ground until you open the door." My dog ejected a Celine Dion CD from the player whenever the fourth track came on. For the life of me, I can't remember the song, but when we discovered this, we had to see if it was an accident. For science! And by the third try, she gave us this look like we were torturing her. And it was Celine, so probably. My first dog was a psychotic Jack Russell by the name of Foxy. Foxy hated being indoors and would rather drag his bed to our garden to sit in the lawn, surrounded by 6-foot fences. One day, a cat wandered along the top of the fence and the dog saw it. God only knows how, but he jumped to the top of the fence and headbutted the cat off it. That dog was a nutter. People who've had a creepy feeling about someone come true. What happened? Not me, but my cousin. She was on an overnight Greyhound bus, and a man got on and many of the seats were full. He walked towards the open seat next to her and looked as if he was going to sit there, and my cousin says, "You can't sit here." Usually a very open and friendly person, she kind of thought to herself, "Wow, I really came off as a B-word there." But she had a bad feeling about him. So the man finds another seat and my cousin falls asleep. A little while later, she wakes up to the bus pulled over to the side of the road and the police cars outside. The police came onto the bus and arrested the man who wanted to sit with my cousin. He had found another woman to sit with and had attempted the unspeakable act on her. How strange. I'm pretty sure that get the frick away from that person is a basic survival instinct. It's whether or not you're listening to it or not. Thank God your cousin did and is okay. My ex-boyfriend's dad had always given me the creeps. Nothing in particular, just a really bad vibe. Broke up with that ex about 8 years ago. I saw in the paper recently his dad got arrested for the unspeakable act. The girl told her mum when she was 13. She had been one of his victims since she was 5. Fricking horrifying. Back when I was in high school, some new kid joined. Only really interacted with him on the football field, but he really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not a small guy, I'm big enough to fend for myself, so while he creeped me out, I wasn't really scared of him. I should have been, but ego gets in the way when you're a teenager. All of a sudden, he tries to injure me in discreet ways while playing football, like stamping on my ankle, tripping me up while none of us had the ball, nobody was looking, etc. After a couple more incidents, he stepped it up, a lot. He ended up stabbing me in the face while I was reading a book. We don't know if he meant to murder me or seriously maim me, but he punched me 3 times with a sharpened key in his fists. 2 of the blows got deflected by my glasses, which left a giant mark on the lenses and where my temple was. Sometimes you feel off about someone, but they don't look like they can really threaten you too much, but in reality, they can and they will. In college, I worked at a bar and they brought in this new bouncer. From the second I met him, I immediately felt like there was something seriously wrong with him. His smile and eye contact were too intense. I told a coworker that the guy gave me the creeps and she told me she thought he was cute and nice, and didn't get where I was coming from. A quick Google search pulled up his mugshot and articles about how he was watching his college roommate's dog one weekend and horribly attacked and maimed it. He burnt this poor dog and poured bleach on her. She thankfully survived and he was arrested. The article talked about how he was laughing at the police arresting him, saying he knows he won't get in any trouble. He was fired and told to never come back once management found out. Oof. Probably doubly saved in that he got fired before he abused his power. Bouncers have a lot of sway around the intoxicated clientele they serve, and it could have got really ugly. Not me, but my mum. My sister was going to visit her friend out of state, so her friend's friend offered to drive her there. He drove a few hours to get to our house and was noticeably tired when we arrived, so my sister suggested he just sleep on the couch and they'll go in the morning. The entire night, my mum's going in and out of our rooms saying that there's something off about the guy, that she really doesn't like him but can't figure out why. She actually quietly went out the side door and wrote down his license plate at one point. The next morning, my sister's in his car for maybe 30 minutes before she feels sick and asks him to just take her home, which he does, much to my mother's delight. About 6 months later, my mum's looking at her news feed when she sees a familiar face and calls my sister and I over and yells, "I told you something was off about him!" Turns out that about a year earlier he had murdered his ex-girlfriend and that his friend, who helped him bury her body, finally decided to tell the cops not because he developed a conscience, but because he was mad at him for stealing his toaster. In conclusion, my mum thought houseguest was creepy. Houseguest turns out to be a murderous toaster thief.
Well, to be fair, I wouldn't want to implicate myself as an accessory after the fact, but steal my kitchen appliances and it's game on.
Pro-life tip: never steal a toaster from the guy who helped you bury your murder victim's body. There was a guy interested in dating my mum years ago. She wasn't interested, something seemed off. He was also interested in dating two of her other friends. All three had young daughters. Shortly after this, we moved away, and he started dating one of the friends. They stayed with us at a weekend music festival, and the girl wanted to stay in the trailer that our family had rented, so we let her. I'll always be grateful we did, because it kept her away from that creep. We found out he was abusing her shortly before we'd heard that he'd died in a car accident. Good riddance.
Guys like that are the main reason I have no interest in dating right now. My daughter is 11 and I'm okay with being single for a few more years. I prefer that to unknowingly bringing a monster into the house. Honestly, having two stepdads who were awful to me, I thank you. I'm not a single mother, but I wish mine would have been okay with just the two of us for a while, because I always felt like she needed a man around and chose two scumbags, one who she knew since she was 16. My brother is 9, and I tell her that if she wants to get married again, I can take my brother to live with me, and I will be single.
Met this guy on a night out. He was new to the area and friends with my friend's brother. He came across as nice and friendly, but then he started being a bit strange, like he kept rubbing my back and touching my legs. We all went back to my friend's house and I was pretty drunk, but this guy kept trying to get me to leave with him without seeing anyone. I told everyone something was weird about him. Turns out he'd been charged with doing the unspeakable act against a 10-year-old, and that's why he'd left his previous city. He'd crept on a 13-year-old a few weeks before he met me, and the police found out he was in possession of a lot of adult material containing children. My mum and I were in a cafe and she had her handbag down by her feet. This couple comes in and sits at the table behind us, and he attracted my attention because he kept poking his girlfriend, telling her how to sit, and just, the hairs on my neck went up. I hate that controlling bullcrap. So he's in my periphery, and this guy won't sit still when my mum says, "Hey, where's my bag?" She finds it a second later, moved and open. She reached in to get her purse and said, "My card is gone." So the couple behind had stood and were walking at speed toward the door. I didn't even hesitate. "Stop that man!" Because I figured I could apologize later if I was wrong. One of the waitresses was right by the door and she followed him out the door, at which point the guy dropped my mum's card, mumbled something about having found it, and then ran for it. I guess if he hadn't been such a butt to his girlfriend, I probably wouldn't have noticed. He was a friend of mine, nicest guy you could ever meet. He would go out of his way to do things for people. Something about him always gave me the slightest weird feeling though. We messaged at least once a day, and then all of a sudden I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Turns out he was busted in a Craigslist sting for soliciting a minor for more adult acts. Hey, I don't know if anyone will see this, but around middle school I started getting creeped out by my father. He wouldn't even do anything you could point to and say, "That, right there, that's it." But you just got the feeling he was like a spider, watching and waiting, something lurking and dangerous. He began running a group called Scam the Scammers, where they'd make scammers do ridiculous things. It was all in good fun, because they deserved it. Humiliating, sometimes painful things. Teachers wouldn't call home to discuss anything we did, positive or negative. There were notes in my file to only discuss things with my mother, no matter what. He started becoming obsessed with conspiracy theories. Obama was a Kenyan Muslim, my mother was cheating on him with a woman and 3 men, all sorts of things. You got the feeling something was wearing my father as a skin suit. That's the best way I can describe it. Turns out he has an inoperable brain tumor. He's permanently changed. My father is alive, but he's no longer my dad. Oof. I mean, I'm all for some lightweight scammer scamming if it doesn't hurt people, but yeah, this case it was just the act of a deeply unwell man. This is tragic. Went to school with this guy since about 4th grade. He was a bully and made sure I knew that I wasn't liked, as he used an old doll and named it after me and beat it up with his friends. He always had a weird, creepy vibe, which got worse in high school. He and his friends were actually a lot nicer to me in high school, but I stayed away as much as I could as he made me uncomfortable. About a year after we graduated, he was arrested for following an underage girl and for grabbing her near her school when she was on lunch break. His friends have since cut off contact. Not sure what's happened to him, but he always creeped me out. When I was trying to get my mental health back on track, I went to see this psychiatrist who just gave me a super creepy vibe the minute I saw him, but was such a good psychiatrist I decided to ignore it.
My gut feeling was correct when about 4 to 5 months into seeing him, he was arrested for having 10,000 plus unsolicited photos of patients' feet or them sitting on his couch that I've sat on. It sucks opening up to someone so much and having something like this happen, especially in his line of work. I had a doctor do the same. Different specialty, different kinds of pics. I'm currently awaiting trial. I know how you feel. It's so much more heinous to use a position of trust to gain access to people just to take advantage of them. Got a bad vibe from the dad across the street when I was a kid. Military guy who always seemed to be on a power trip. His oldest son and I went to the same school and would occasionally carpool. One day it was his dad's turn to drive us. His son stayed home sick, but he offered to drive me all the same. Thankfully, it wasn't a long ride, but the entire time he talked about his beat-up Camaro. Definitely creeped me out. Fast forward a couple of years, his wife threw him out one morning. Turns out he'd been beating the crap out of her for a while. One morning while hitting her again, he stepped on their 1-year-old baby who was crawling on the floor and broke the kid's arm. Never saw him again after that. It's like my worst nightmare to step on a baby or even a cat or dog. Or close a door by accident on a cat sneaking through behind you like they do. I was just thinking yesterday that stuff like this must happen fairly often even from good people that just make one wrong step. You could easily kill a kid, cat, or dog by slipping and falling wrong on them. The world is too dangerous. Time to go back to bed. I worked in fast food restaurants from 14 to 16. The lovely old couple sold it to a younger couple and I got the creeps around the husband from day one. Tried to ignore it, just got on with work, but the first time we were working just the two of us, he followed me into a walk-in freezer and grabbed me. I learned to pay attention to my radar after that. There was this guy that one of my friends at church was dating at the time. I really just felt something dark when I was around him. They eventually married but divorced later on. It turns out that feeling was because this guy is a legit serial killer. Initially, he confessed to I think 3 murders. The police now believe he's responsible for at least 10 within 200 miles of our small town. There was a kid who always weirded me out in school. Nothing major, but he looked at girls too long, and never when they looked at him. When I was in 8th grade, he told my girlfriend that he wondered what she tasted like and wanted to touch her skin. I threatened him if he didn't leave her be. I saw his name on an indecent offender registry last year, when I was helping my mum search for property details. Guy in high school always gave me the creeps, but I could never figure out why. 6 months later, they find a rifle in his locker at school and that he'd called in bomb threats. This was before any of the school shootings happened in the US, so at the time I didn't really think that much of it. Now it totally freaks me out. I just looked him up and there's an entire Reddit thread about him. He's now a white supremacist and a possible murderer. A dude couch surfing at my son's apartment had a very twitchy vibe like an addict hurting for a fix. I asked my son, "Oh no, he hates substances. He just has like arthritis or something." He borrowed my son's car, got his fix, crashed the car. Said he got carjacked. We reported the car stolen. 2 days later, he OD'd in my son's apartment. My son found him and the EMS guys saved him. My son realized he had issues and started looking for Medicaid rehab space. Dude OD'd again on the couch. EMS saved him again. Narcan is magic. We went to the hospital, told him he could not come back and to text my son where he wanted his stuff dropped off. We dropped it off at his grandma's house. Well, this fellow was clearly in need of serious help. Wish there was more to say about stories like this, but it's just sad, isn't it? Addiction is an illness. When I was 19, I worked at a local restaurant. I loved working there, but I ended up quitting because of some D-bag that was hired. He was in his mid-30s and gave every girl in the restaurant the absolute creepiest vibes. He was constantly saying inappropriate stuff about his past and was just a butthole to people in general. I hated working with him because he creeped me out and was also just mean. I started trading shifts to get away from him. One day a night shift manager was fired and our boss put creepy guy in a temporary manager position. I immediately went to our boss and told him I was uncomfortable with the idea and explained how creepy he was. My boss leveled with me and said the D-bag had no actual manager power and was just temporary until he found someone else. He was just there to run shifts. My boss arranged it so my schedule never crossed over with the creep. One day a coworker of mine got sick and I was asked to cover her shift. I get there and creep is managing. I thought I could deal with one night, but a friend of mine called the store sobbing. She had tried to call my cell around 100 times, but it was in my purse. She was crying hysterically and told me she'd been a victim of the unspeakable act and didn't know what to do or where to go, but that she was horrified and too scared to leave. I told my friend I'd be right there and told D-bag that I had an emergency and would be leaving. It was a slow night and I wasn't needed anyway, but he freaked out and tried to physically stop me, demanding to know my emergency. I tried to sidestep it, but eventually told him what had happened to my friend. He burst out laughing in my face and told me that was hilarious and not an excuse to leave. I told him to go to hell and shoved past him. He told me I couldn't leave and I said, "Watch me." I went outside and burst into tears and called my boss and told him I quit after explaining what had happened. A few months later, I was working at my new job and a former co-worker came in and said they had some news for me. Apparently 2 police officers showed up at my old workplace and served papers to D-bag. He had been stalking a girl for the last 5 years, and it had started when she was 14 or 15. He had finally committed the unspeakable act against her. In conclusion, Creep gets hired at work, laughs about the unspeakable act, I hate him, and I quit. He gets charged with the stalking and unspeakable act against a teenage girl. I always had a weird feeling about my stepdad. He always made me uncomfortable, and I always felt like he was watching me. He would make comments about my body and my wardrobe, causing me to feel insecure and watch what I wore around him. When I told my mum, she would say things like, "He's old-fashioned," or "He's just looking out for you." My mum had gone out to the country to visit family, leaving my stepdad, myself, and my older brother to take care of the house. One night, my brother went to a party and I stayed home because I worked early the next morning, but left my bedroom door open so I could hear my brother come home and make sure he made it safe. Instead, my stepdad decided to crawl under my bed and try to commit the unspeakable act against me. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I pushed him off and ran to the bathroom. I was so freaked out, I just grabbed my work clothes and went to the car and drove off to a random neighborhood and slept in my car. My mum found out a year later because I told my older brother, but she's never talked to me about it. And she's still with him, too. When I told my brother, we gathered all the money we'd been saving up and moved out a month later. I'm blessed to have a brother who loves me and took me out of a bad place. He's been one of my support systems through all this. As for me, I'm in therapy to deal with my trauma and I feel like I'm getting better. A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to type all of this out. I worked for a call center a few years ago and there was a guy that sat at the desk across from me. He was about 40 to 50 and was not married. I'm young enough to be his daughter. He would do anything to talk to me. Come by my desk, run into me in the break room, get in the elevator with me. It was excessive but never threatening at first. He started to say inappropriate things about my outfits. I never wore anything overly provocative, but I figured he was just an awkward dude that did not know how to flirt. I just brushed him off time and time again, but something was definitely off about him. At one point, the secretary came up to me and asked if he was bothering me, and I told her what had been happening. Turns out he did this with only blonde women at the office. He was notorious for creeping them out. It started small, but then he would slowly transition into propositioning them for adult fun times and offering to pay for it. Knowing this, I avoided him altogether. I would pretend he was not there even if he was talking to me directly. I would catch him staring at me, but he backed down a lot after he realized that I wouldn't give in. One day, I came into work and he was gone. Desk was cleared off, totally empty. He apparently had sent another blonde woman a bunch of flowers and followed her out into the parking lot where she got off work. He had parked his car right next to hers and tried to force her into his car to go home with him, but she got away. He was fired and escorted off the property the next day by the police. I'm not sure why he had decided to come back or why he wasn't arrested sooner, but he was caught at work and removed. Nothing too eventful, but it is scary knowing that it could have been me that he forced into his car. A neighborhood kid I grew up with liked to play with matches and was fascinated with fires of any kind. It made me nervous because a sort of wild look came over his eyes when he'd stare into the fire he had created. I even told my parents, who mentioned it to his parents, who thought it was just a phase he was going through. Then a few years later, it was reported that he burned his parents' garage down and was being charged with arson and clinically treated for pyromania. When I used to work at a deli, we hired a 20-something kid that looked like the serial killer Ed Kemper, sans the mustache. At first, he would amuse us by telling us stories about how he'd fought off 8 guys with weapons, or how his girlfriend was a model who traveled all the time, and that's why we never saw her. Then things started getting bad, especially when someone angered him. I would catch him talking to himself, saying things like, "If I see that B word again, I'm going to stick this in both her eyes." Management got wind of this and canned his butt immediately. 10 months later, we find out he actually went to prison for attempting to assault someone with a knife. In college, my best friend met a lady in one of her AG classes. The lady was super weird. I remember her having this huge vendetta against the university because they wouldn't let her use handicapped parking spaces when she had no proof she needed them. This lady is the reason I Google the crap out of new people now, because I looked her up and found an article that she was a serial animal hoarder and mistreater. That was from the year before we met her, and she would be the feature of similar articles in the future. This was at the start of our second semester there. If you search her name, plus Cat Lady, there are a bunch of news stories starting in 2003. It looks like the last updates were in 2016. In conclusion, best friend makes new friend who turns out to be an animal hoarder with dead cats in her freezer. Not me, but my wife. She's a teacher and had an elementary student who creeped her out from day one. He was manipulative, always trying to get his work done by copying other students' papers, and generally just a little odd. Partway through the school year, his mum had a manic-depressive episode and sadly took her own life. 2 years later, the student blew part of his hand off, making a pipe bomb. A year after that, he was also left unsupervised with a kindergarten-aged student who ironically, my wife would also later have as a student, and horribly mistreated her. He's in juvie now, though he should be out before he's 17. I was so young that I don't remember, but my dad has told me this story. My uncle had a roommate when I was about 3 years old. He was apparently a pretty nice dude on the surface, friendly, and didn't at all appear creepy to my dad or uncle that he lived with. Once, my dad and uncle expressed wanting to go somewhere that wasn't appropriate for me, and the guy offered to babysit. I was a very sweet and quiet kid, but upon my dad saying he'd be back in a little bit and I was going to stay with this man for a few hours, I apparently threw an absolute crap storm, kicking, screaming, and refusing. And even at 3, this was absolutely not normal behavior. My dad was really confused, but changed his mind and did not leave me with him. And only weeks later, my uncle discovered the man in question had a history of prison time for possessing indecent material containing minors and attempted kidnapping. People that quit their job in a hilarious fashion, how did you do it? My wife worked for a certain chain coffee shop a few years ago. She got another job, so requested reduced hours. This didn't happen for 3 straight weeks. During that 3rd week, she had a soccer mum from hell trying to get her attention by throwing fricking snowballs at her through the drive-through window. My wife then stopped what she was doing and tossed the soccer mum's iced tea at her, which exploded everywhere and slammed the window. 5 minutes later, she had written her letter of resignation with the only things she could find: a purple crayon and a sticky note. I used to work at a place that rhymes with Pizza Hut, and the managers there were real cheapskates. There was this nice old man that would come in every Sunday and order a triple extra cheese pizza, and while they charged him for 3 times the cheese, they would forbid us from ever actually putting that much cheese on a pizza because apparently cheese in the pizza selling world is akin to gold. So instead of 3 times extra cheese, he would really be getting what the instructions would qualify as barely enough for a regular cheese pizza. On the day my 2 weeks' notice ended, the old guy just happened to be my last order, so I went into the walk-in and grabbed an entire box of cheese and proceeded to dump the entire thing onto his pizza, and tossed it into the oven. It was stacked so high that it couldn't even fit into it and half of it was scraped off. Anyway, the look on the old guy's face when he saw me do this made it all worth it. Imagine pure excitement. Needless to say, I didn't put the correct phone number down for future job references. That poor guy probably ordered double cheese and then thought, well crap, this isn't enough either, and went with triple, only to be given the same amount anyway. Worked in pizza place for 5 years. Cheese is definitely the gold of that world. It's the most expensive thing on the pizza. Dough and sauce cost almost nothing. As a home pizza enthusiast, this is definitely true. Especially when you get deep into the hobby, you will spend a damn fortune on that edible gold. Worked as a teller at a bank for a few years. GM and supervisor were both kind of crappy in their own ways. My buddy there was also a teller who felt similarly and wanted to get out. We started applying in places and both got interviews at the same company. As luck would have it, we both got hired and phone calls about 10 minutes apart. There was only one other teller aside from us, and when it got busy, supervisor usually had to jump in as well, and usually hated it. It felt like we were constantly short-staffed, and days when one person would call out sick or be on vacation would suck. Being down 2 people was the worst. Naturally, when we both got hired, it became a race to see who could turn in their 2 weeks' notice first. He printed his off and raced into the GM's office, walking out with a big smile. GM calls me in and offers me full-time hours after I had been requesting them for months. I jumped in saying, "Let me stop you right there. I'm also turning in my 2 weeks' notice." Remembering that look of disbelief will make me smile every time. A solid professional FU is just as enjoyable to me as going out with a bang. Wrote a normal letter of resignation before I got in the shower one morning. No big deal, got into the office and was straight ignored by management. Oh well, told you when my last day was. Fast forward 3 days, they pull me into a conference room to ask what it would take to keep me. I say, nothing, but don't want to ruin them. Sole IT manager for a staff of 70, and would be willing to consult part-time. They liked that idea and said they'd be willing to pay me my current hourly as a consultant. I was prepared for this and told them that wasn't what I said. I said I would consult and my consulting rate was $200 an hour. They were flabbergasted and insulted. I was making about $18 an hour as a salary. They thought it was insane even though they'd pay a consulting firm $600 an hour when I was on vacation. Needless to say, having planned to quit, it was no skin off my back and laughed about it. They didn't take kindly to me laughing about their anger and told me to pack my crap. I did so, got an extra 10 days vacation paid out of it. 1992. I was 19 and working at the most pissant radio studio imaginable, AM Country Gold. The notoriously cheap, abusive and dishonest owner, a fella named Wes, had just screwed me out of a promised bonus. It was the latest in a long line of dishonest acts and I'd had enough. The rest of the sales team was afraid to stand up to Wes and he screamed abuse at them constantly. Except the lone woman, who he was constantly a creep to. They were all in their 30s and 40s working the same garbage job I was, but desperately needed it. I didn't. So I engaged in a very public shouting match with Wes in the lobby, saying all the things everyone there had always wanted to say. Then I swept the contents of the front desk onto the floor and stormed out. Instead of leaving, I went around the side of the building to a payphone and called the radio station request line. In a fake southern accent, I said, "Hey y'all, I just told my cheap, no-good, lying piece of human garbage boss to go to hell. Play me out with, take this job and shove it, and dedicate it to my former boss, Wes." The disc jockey had no idea what had just happened in the lobby, or that my Wes was the Wes, so he enthusiastically played my recorded dedication and added, "This one is for you, Wes. Choke on it, you sack of crap." The building had speakers inside and out, constantly playing the radio feed, so I got to hear Wes get clowned by his own radio studio before driving off into the sunset. Someone at my previous workplace, a huge grocery store in a large mall, went to the PA system we use to issue messages to the whole mall and said something along the lines of, "Dear customers, managers and co-workers, I fricking quit," and then proceeded to leave. Someone did this at the Walmart I worked at. Customer busybodies complained because of the curse word. The manager just asked, "What do you want me to do? He already quit." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's really nothing I can do. As you already heard yourself, he frickin' quit." I wrote a respectful letter thanking them for the opportunity and all they've taught me. The first letter of every sentence spelled out F-U-C-K, boss's name. Nobody noticed. I knew someone who worked in a really crappy call center. His boss never had time for anyone. When he went to tell his boss that he was leaving, the boss waved him out of the room as he was on call. So he wrote, "I quit" on a post-it note, stuck it on the boss's screen, and just walked out. I did this when I worked at Kaufman's. I went up to HR to give my 2 weeks notice, GTFO, but before I could even get a word out, the HR lady flapped her hand at me and told me to come back in an hour because she was going on lunch. So I wrote, "I quit" on a piece of paper, signed and dated it, and left it on her desk. She called me later to let me know that since I didn't give 2 weeks notice, I would never be eligible to work for Kaufman's or Macy's ever again. I told her I'd just have to live with that. I do love it when people threaten to cut off a tie that I have clearly just severed myself. Bad jobs, bad exes, crappy ex-friends. I don't care if you never want to talk to me again. That was actually the point. I used to work for my father. It was probably the worst time of my life. He treated me like absolute crap, paid me very poorly, and made me work 70+ hours a week. I was young, just out of high school, and I complained about my predicament a lot. His response was always, "If you don't like it, there's the door." 6 months before I quit, he made me run his night shift, which meant 6 p.m. through 6:30 a.m. Monday through Saturday. I was very unhappy about this, so I applied for another job. I got it and went to my father's office with a list of demands. He responded with his usual reply, so I said, "All right, I've gotten a job offer somewhere else. Frick you, I quit." The look on his face was priceless. He truly believed that because I had an amazing job security, that I'd be willing to put up with anything and that I'd stay there for my entire career. In one short, sweet instant, I proved to him that this was not the case, and he lost his most valuable employee. The icing on the cake was the fact that the job that I left him for is at the company that manufactures the very machinery and software he relies on in business. So anytime something goes wrong in his factory, he has to call me to fix it for him. So, how are family events these days? Honestly, they're much better than they used to be. I hated working for him so much and wasted some of my best years slaving away for him without so much as a thank you. I never actually talked to him when I worked for him. I'd have formal discussions when I had to for work, but outside of work I literally never saw him. Now I don't really have any issues with him at all. First job when I was 15 for a discount clothing brand store. Head manager was the aunt for our store manager, who was 19. Our store manager did nothing most of the time and used to chat to her boyfriend and friends quite loudly on the store phone, much to the annoyance of everybody. One night, it's come closing, we're grabbing our coats and getting ready to leave after a really busy day, and the store manager storms in, telling us how she's lowered the shutters and won't let us leave until we've helped her finish the one job she had all day to do, cause her aunt is doing a surprise inspection in the morning. Everyone is teed off, especially the people who've had to watch her do literally nothing all day. She turns spiteful, threatening to delay our pays, dock our wages, etc. All bullcrap. For one woman, it was the last straw. She had a kid to pick up from a club, so she waited till she left us alone to work, walked up to the shutters, pulled them up manually by hand, and all of us crawled out to freedom. We left her a note saying, "Good luck explaining to your aunt why 4 people just quit." During my exit interview, I told HR the real reason I was leaving was due to the quality of the office chairs. I said they were an eyesore, uncomfortable, and made me ashamed to come to work and resulted in subpar job satisfaction. 2 weeks later, I was told by previous coworkers everyone got brand new, top-of-the-line office chairs. I worked for my aunt for nearly 5 years. It was a product delivery and retail store. When I came to work there, I was originally supposed to be running computers and taking orders to cover for them in the week they all took vacations. As time went on, I started running the retail part on Saturdays, and my willingness to do so was the only reason they opened on the fricking weekend. I took over the office running by myself on Sundays as well, and at a point worked 7 days straight for a month or more until someone realized I might need a break. My cousin was in charge of the front retail, and she resented me for working in the back with her mother. She snapped one day and started being rude and abrasive to customers, so we got switched front to back. I worked every single job in that place, save for driving the box trucks. I'd had enough when they hired a new guy who I found out was making exactly the same an hour as me, $8.25. Never work for family. That sucks, I'm sorry, and you're right. Never work for family, never rent from family, never loan money to family. Business is business, personal is personal. Keep them separate. I worked for a law firm doing research and analysis. I wrote a custom program on my own time that would automate editing down these huge lists we'd get from an outside vendor, boiling it down to only what we wanted. First, only my team used the code. By the time I left, over 150 people were using it. It sounds minimal, but it was actually a huge time saver. The program would boil down a list, 100 pages long, to about 10 pages, a process we used to do manually a couple of times a day. A layoff was announced, and I was part of the outplacement, but the firm wanted to continue using my program. I asked if there would be compensation as it was coded on my own time, never paid for it, etc. I was told no, and besides, there's nothing really keeping us from using it when you're gone. For the remainder of my time, 2 years, I would create patches whenever the format of the data changed. With my last patch, I put in code that would disable the program and erase key parts of the program 1 month after my last day. From what I understand from people still with the firm, on day X, everyone came in, booted their machines, and the program was simply gone. Efficiency fell through the floor, delaying opening cases, billing clients, etc. I wanted 10K, they lost more than that in the first week without the program. Some have stated I might have been in a position to sue for compensation instead. This was a huge law firm, billed in the hundreds of millions a year, and had thousands of very talented attorneys. I could have sued, sure, but they could have made it very expensive for me, dragged it out so long, it would have cost me way too much. This is my third quitting stories batch of posts with this channel, and I'm not sure I'll ever get tired of this particular subject. There is some real vicarious joy to be had with people sticking it to their bosses. I was working for Argos as a Christmas job while studying. After a while, it was becoming too much as I had to stay in work until deliveries were unpacked. This meant some days I was leaving for my college at 8:30 a.m. and not getting home until 1 a.m. that night. One night was a particularly large delivery and it was getting very late with no end in sight. I decided I'd had enough and told the supervisor I was finished, didn't want to do the job anymore and wanted to go home. He rejected this and said I was going nowhere until the delivery was unpacked. I stood in front of him and repeated that I quit, therefore I don't care about the delivery. Completing my studies was more important to me than earning an extra bit of cash. He still said I was going nowhere and refused to unlock the door to let me out. Despite feeling I had case for false imprisonment, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I ran out the fire escape door and down the street never to return. I'll always remember the sound of the fire escape door making a big dong as it hit the metal railings, and I made my escape to freedom. Worked in a video store, back when there was such a thing. My coworker showed up having taken clearly a lot of green herb. He was also about 6'3" and 140 pounds, so he stood out in a crowd to begin with. Anyway, he came in for a 4-hour shift, stood in the middle of our bank of checkout registers and just ate chips. Like 6 bags of chips back to back, and he ate them slow, and he savored the crap out of each bite. The whole time he had zero facial expression. Think of the dull stare of a chewing dairy cow. After about 3 hours, he calmly turns to me and says, "I can't do this anymore," and gently sets down his bag of chips and walks out the door. We never saw him in the store again. At 16, I worked at a Dairy Queen brazier in Texas. My manager was a jerk. One night, I sliced a good chunk of my thumb off because they did not have the proper safety equipment. After being out of work for 3 weeks, I returned to work. My thumb was still pretty screwed up, but I was trying. My manager kept riding me, telling me I had to move faster. I was the only short-order cook when I saw 3 Greyhound buses pull up, and I knew I was in trouble. She came back into the kitchen and said if I didn't move fast for these buses, she'd find someone who would. That was the last straw. I knew no one in the entire restaurant could cook, so I took her up on her threat and simply walked out the back door. She flipped me off as I drove away. My friends told me that they hardly got any orders out and the buses left since they couldn't get the food out. I felt bad for the people on the buses, but I was sick of being berated by management. Worked in the cinema as a teenager, came in late for work after they changed my schedule during my days off and didn't think to mention it to me. Boss lost it and started shouting at me. As far as I'm concerned, if you need to shout, I'm not even listening. So I let her rant away for a good 15 minutes while I was at my locker clearing it out. When it finally clicked that I wasn't listening or getting ready to work, she stopped and asked what I was doing. I said, "Going to see Lord of the Rings with the lads who've just finished, as I'm doing nothing else with my evening. Might go for a pint after. What's your plans?" "I like this one. It's simple and clear, and you didn't curse or scream at her." When my boss was having a meltdown, one of my coworkers kept saying, "Didn't catch that. Could you speak up?" She literally lost her voice, screaming at him. I worked for AmITheA garage. One week we got a new service manager, and up until that point we always inspected, estimated, and sold our own jobs. This new guy wanted to inspect the cars and then checked the estimates. Early on Saturday morning, a girl in her 20s with a baby came into the shop and said her brakes were making noise. I took the ticket, test drove the car, and then pulled it into the shop and then inspected the car. I found the LR brake shoe had gone metal to metal. I mic'd the drum, and it was okay. Wheel cylinders and springs, hardware, all okay. I estimated the ticket. It came out to about $150 to fix the car. I went to the new service manager and handed him the estimate. He went and looked at the car. He didn't even take 30 seconds, and he said he needed to add new wheel cylinders, hardware kit, and 2 drums to the estimate. I told him all the parts he wanted to replace were okay. He said, "Do it." I just shrugged my shoulders and walked away. He went back to the service desk. I walked into a completely crowded waiting area, stood in the middle of the room, and proceeded to tell everyone in the room what the new service manager wanted me to do. I turned around and went to go get my truck to load my toolbox and leave. The service manager tried to stop me from loading my box on my truck. At the time, about 5 customers came out and helped me lift the box into the truck, and then started screaming at the service manager. They all wanted their cars back together and taken off the lifts. It got so bad one customer called the cops, and the service manager called the owner. The cops and the owner showed up. I was putting the girl's wheel back on. The owner came over to talk to me, and I told him what had happened and what I did. The owner went over to the service manager, who was surrounded by all the teed-off customers, and fired him. I decided at that point I was still going to quit because the owner was just acting. He told the service manager to do it, obviously. At that point, a few other techies were packing their crap up too. As I was walking up to my truck to leave, the girl walked up to me and thanked me. She asked if I knew another shop that could fix her car, and I decided I would fix it myself. So we went over to the parts store, got the parts, went to my house, and redid the brakes. Not to make this whole story even longer, this was in 1989 and we've been married for 24 years now. The service manager couldn't get a job at any shop around. I still see him every once in a while, gathering up the grocery carts at H-E-B. I managed to find a telemarketing job as one of my first jobs. It sucked and we were treated like animals, but it was close enough that I could walk there from home. I only intended to stay long enough to afford a car. One day, I realized that I had reached my set amount of dollars for a car purchase. As a joke, I strayed as far from the sales pitch as possible. I changed my greetings to things like, "Hey," or "Sup." I impersonated celebrity voices. People stopped working around me. They just listened in shock. But it also completely backfired. It was my highest day of sales ever. I sold 10 times my average. The pit boss was bewildered, which is why I wasn't fired right away. He listened in on my calls that day. He begged me to stay, but I was out. I used to work for a telecommunications company. My mum was very sick over the last 3 months of her life, so I had to go home most weekends to see her. It's a 6-hour journey to get from where I worked to the town where I'm from. When her birthday came around, I requested a couple of days off that I'd saved for this specific occasion. Yet the days off were denied because we were approaching a busy time of the year for sales. At this point, I hadn't mentioned what was happening at home because, well, I was always taught you keep your work and personal lives separate. But I said to my boss, who at the time I saw as a pretty compassionate person. She never took any issue when I got sick or was late for whatever reason. But when I told her, she just looked at me point blank and said, "I don't want to hear this." After that meeting, I went back to my desk and sat there for about 20 minutes thinking of a solution. The solution was to get my things and just leave. I said goodbye to my friends and on my way out, flipped my boss off and just walked out. I went straight to my car and drove back to my hometown that night. It was the best decision I ever made. I got to spend all my time with my mum before she went. We even got to go on vacation and spend one last week away together because I had time to do so. I'll never, ever regret walking out that day. Not exactly hilarious, but I had a good chuckle to myself on that drive home. The look on my boss's face will never leave me. It was sweet. I worked as a mechanic at Pep Boys several years ago. While I worked there, some of us discovered that if the drainage pipe in the shop were pressurized, the toilet would shoot water out of the bowl. The service manager at my store was a piece of crap. The day that I quit, I waited until he went into the bathroom to take a dump. I filled up a cheater, a device used to seat a tire onto a wheel, and released about 200 psi all at once into the drainage pipe. The toilet fricking exploded, the manager screamed, and then comes storming out of the bathroom covered in his own crap. It's the middle of the lunch rush at the restaurant. It's a gorgeous day, but the porch is closed, so myself and this poor middle-aged waitress are taking everyone who's expected to sit outside into our room. We're providing crap service because there's usually 5 servers for this many people, not 2. I asked the manager if she wouldn't mind calling people in to open up the porch, which is where all of these people are expected to sit. She goes off on me. "Are you fricking kidding me?" I exclaim. "You just swore at a manager. You're fired." I was going back to college in 2 weeks, so I didn't really give a frick. The thing is, she had to cash me out first, so for those 10 minutes I quietly cussed her out in front of everyone until she started screaming her head off in the middle of the restaurant. She was fired a couple of weeks later. What was your most awesome "don't F with me" moment? I will gladly start. One day, I was out fishing at a local pond with a few girls that I went to school with. We had gotten close because of Honours Society, and yes, they're attractive. We catch a few bass and channel catfish and decide it's time to head home before dusk sets tonight. Mind you, there's about a 150 to 200 yard path from the parking lot to the actual pond, so we started heading down said path. As we get about halfway down, we see 2 local thugs who have dropped out of high school and are always around to cause trouble in our town. Since I'm carrying all of the tackle for non-fishermen, rods, lures, tackle box, etc., I'm also trailing the 3 girls. As we got closer to the thugs, I hear one of them yelling bullcrap like, "Damn, mummy, look at that butt," and "Crap, I'd screw every single one of you," right in front of the girls. Next, the guy in front turns around and grabs one of my friend's butts and slaps her right in the chest. This teed me off more than anything, and I stupidly yell, "Hey, frick butts, don't even frickin' look at them." I admit I'm a little hot-tempered and probably could have handled the situation much better, but frick it, I was in the heat of the moment. The 2 guys start walking over to me, obviously ready to beat my butt. With quick thinking, I dropped my tackle and flipped out my 4-inch Smith & Wesson knife from my pocket, and to put the icing on the cake, I pull out my car bar that I use for filleting. After this, the story kind of winds down. The dudes were silent after that, took a very wide path around us, and we were on our way. Needless to say, that was my great "don't frick with me" moment. To clarify to those asking, I did not get laid. However, I did get a free dinner out of it. Well, that could have gone one of 2 ways, and I for one am very happy that those guys just chose to walk away. But nonetheless, well done, Knifey McFisherman. My friend's dad is a truck driver, and he used to pick up hitchhikers all the time. One time he picked 2 of them up, and they started on the journey to wherever they were going. After an hour, one decides he's going to try and jack the truck, and pulls out a knife. Well, my friend's dad, being super cool and steely, floors it and says, "You're gonna put that knife away, or I'm gonna kill us all," and steers directly toward the concrete dividers that were splitting the highway up ahead. The would-be truck jackers put away the knife and sit quietly for the rest of the ride, and he still drops them off at their destination. That's a bad motherfricker right there. I think you mean a bad butt mother trucker. He must have had a mustache to store his extra testicle in. I was living with a middle-aged woman. Since I'm middle-aged as well, this was a fairly decent arrangement. Her daughter was living with us as well, 17 years old and hell on wheels. From what I understand, one of her former boyfriends became upset with her because she had a new boyfriend. He was going to come to my home and beat the crap out of her under my roof. He said that if I got in his way, he was going to beat my butt as well. A friend of hers caught wind of what was happening and called her mother. She called me. The boy showed up with an audience. I greeted them just by poking my head out of the door and telling them to get the frick off my property. The butthole gets out of the vehicle. I open the door and he can see that I'm packing a 45 in my shoulder rig. I also have an 870 by the door. I hear a forlorn, "Hi, John," to me, from his friend that came along to witness him beating my butt. I repeat my demand that the man remove himself from my property, and he complied. It could have been the gun, then again it could have been the shovel leaning against my truck, and the fact that no one would come looking for him if he disappeared that far from town. My great-grandfather was a CB in World War II. Somewhere along the way he got his hands on a frag grenade. When he came home, he unscrewed the pin fuse mechanism, dumped out the black powder that makes the boom boom, and put the fuse back on so it looked like a regular grenade. He kept it on his bedstand for the rest of his life. Apparently this was also when someone broke into his house, he could calmly walk out with the grenade, pull the pin, and threaten to blow everyone to heck and back if they didn't kindly replace anything they'd taken and exit his property. I work as an EMT, and one time we had a bloodbath of a call. Old lady had damn near scalped herself in a fall, and it was quite messy. Trying to keep her calm to keep the bandages on her freely flowing head. After the call, I was covered from the front down in my uniform and took off the top layer to reveal my undershirt, which was also covered in blood. Too late in the day and not caring, I was hopping in the back of the rig and heading back to base to change. My apartment was a mile from the base, so I headed there instead. As we pull up, I hear voices yelling and hop out in my now blood-drenched clothes. I turn around the corner and see 3 guys grabbing and pulling one of my neighbors, an elderly woman who doesn't speak much English. So I quickly take stock of the situation and grab a tire iron from the side of the rig, which was slightly out of view. I take a few steps and yell, "Leave her alone or you're going to pay," while my partner calls for PD backup. They turn around just as some of the outside lights come on and reveal me, a 5'10" skinny guy, covered in blood with tactical pants on, with a tire iron. Their faces were priceless. Suddenly one of them books, and the other says to the last guy there, "Frick it, I'm not dealing with that dude," and follows his friend. I help the lady and then realize what a scary sight I was. Some dude, covered in blood with a tire iron, coming out from around the corner into the light and angry. She ended up being fine, and I changed rather quickly after that. The police came and got what little info they could, and we were all on our way. But gosh darn, I felt like a superhero. In conclusion, covered in blood, I scared off 3 thugs who wanted to beat an old Russian lady with a tire iron and good lighting. Now, this I can get behind. Theatricality and costume over violence any day. Batman would be proud of you, sir. Long story short, my passport got stolen and my only way back home was a train from Oakland, California, back to Canada. So I was sitting at the train station for like 2 hours and decided to go for a walk around that part of Oakland, across from where the Raiders and A's play. Being naive and from Canada, I had no idea what this meant. It took me less than 10 minutes to realize that I'd made a horrible decision. A car started driving around the block I was walking down. I had a suitcase and a backpack and a large bag. It was a long trip. After the 3rd time being circled around, I decided to walk back, and quickly. That worked well until I had to cross the parking lot, where this car pulled in as well. Now, being from Canada, all of a sudden the thought of these scary stories of gang shootings and muggings from the American news got me scared. I try not to profile people, but the 3 guys who got out of the car are what we see as the typical gangsters. Pants to ankles, gold chains, gold teeth, driving an old Cadillac. The driver steps in front of my walking path because I've been trying to avoid eye contact. He stops me and goes, "Yo man, you not from here," and laughs. "What you got in there? Hey, I should check it out." His 2 friends are leaning over the car, and one pulls a bat out of the car and places it on the roof. This is where my instincts kick in and I lose control of any real thinking. So I start yelling in the most aggressive way possible. "I got my fricking crap, that's what I got. I'm from Surrey fricking BC, and if you think pulling out a bat means you fricking scare me, you think twice. You better have something more than that to get at me. I step over smackheads on my way to work every morning, and I stabbed a guy for pushing me in a bus line. So if you want to start something, fricking start it." Now, obviously, I've never stabbed anyone, and I'm from Surrey, and I do step over smackheads on my way to work, but I don't know where any of this came from. By all physical appearances, I'm a bit of a dork, and I'm gay, so I have no idea where any of this came from, but my heart was racing, and this is what came out. So I stood there for a few seconds, breathing heavily, fists clenched, posed in the same stupid-looking come-at-me-bro pose, like I was ready to battle a lion. The guy looks at his other friends and then goes, "My bad, man," and then gets back in the car and they leave. About a minute after they left, I actually had to sit down because my legs would not work. I was so scared. So that's how I almost died. I don't actually think this would or could ever happen again in the same situation. I have almost never raised my voice in my life. But I really didn't want to die. Also, after the gong show of losing your passport in a foreign country and having to take a train home, your emotions get the best of you. I've had a similar moment. At the time, I was 23 and super goth. We're talking 8-inch platform boots, on top of being 6'1", skin-tight rubber pants, makeup, shaved off and drawn-on eyebrows, girls' tank top, the works. So I was very androgynous. On my way home, in the ghetto, on a bus full of inner-city high school kids just out of school, and this tough guy thug is giving me the hairy eyeball the whole ride. I get off at my stop and the kid follows me. He couldn't have been more than 16, but he thinks he's hard. He starts harnessing me, threatening to beat my queer butt if I don't give him my wallet. I turn calmly around to face him and I say, "Look, kid, I'm 23 and I've been dressing like this since I was 15. You think this would be my first fight? Why don't you walk the frick away before you have to explain to your friends how you got yourself beat by a queer?" I then turned my back on him and walked back home while he stood there in silence. It's kind of a cliche line, but damn if it doesn't work. Two guys at a bar, one sitting next to me and the other across, start fricking with me for no apparent reason. They were clearly on the sauce. The fact that I ordered the crappy bar pizza is a testament to the fact that I was nearing that point too. At the point the waitress came by and dropped my pizza off, the guy across from me is basically challenging me to walk outside. At that moment, the sad excuse of a D-bag next to me makes a grab at my pizza. Through some amazing drunken luck, I see this out of the corner of my eye, launch my arm out, and backslap the crap out of this guy's arm. They must have thought I knew martial arts because they didn't say a word after this and got up to leave. Don't mess with my pizza. How do we have these moments of supreme physical coordination when we've had a fair bit to drink? I once landed a chip in my friend's wine glass from across a big room after a medically inadvisable amount of liquor, and I could never do that sober. Same probably goes for Karate McBar pizza. Mine was more of a don't F with me because my brother is bat crap crazy moment. I have an older gay brother. It was pretty well known that he was gay in high school, but nobody ever flat out asked me about it. One day, two guys from the football team, both juniors, are giving me a hard time. Suddenly, brother walks over and says, "Hey, leave him alone. This isn't a request." One guy replies, "Shut up, queer. What are you gonna do?" My brother's answer still sticks with me to this day. See, you should think about that. I've been a queer about as long as I can remember, which means I got into fights every day. So I know I can fight. How about you? Can you actually fight? Or do you just try to scare people? Because you don't scare me. I've effed guys bigger than both of you. Again, leave my brother alone. F you, queer. You're not my type. I like men. At this point, a little crowd had gathered and they began to laugh at my brother's last comment. The two guys scowled, huffed, and walked away. My brother looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sorry if that was awkward." I used to get in fights a lot, but I think the best one was at a bar with my buddy watching baseball games. My buddy loves the Red Sox and doesn't drink, and I think baseball is stupid, but I love drinking, so we reached a kind of compromise. Anyway, while my friend Scott is chatting up this girl next to him about the Sox or whatever, these two guys next to us in Yankees jerseys are becoming more and more belligerent, yelling, throwing crap at the TV, and just generally being buttheads. Now, I know enough about baseball to know Boston and New York hate each other. Hell, I'm originally from Philadelphia, we hate everyone. But I didn't think these two were going to be much trouble aside from being loud. Then, for whatever reason, one of the big New Yorkers guys decides to dump a full beer on this Red Sox chick my friend was talking to. At this point, my entirely sober friend said something along the lines of, "Hey dude, what the frick?" This dude turned to my buddy, reeled drunkenly for a moment, and then leaned way back and made that huge hocking a loogie sound, and right as he leaned into spit, I swung at him, forgetting I still had a full beer mug in my hand. According to my friend and his lady friend, the spit totally came all the way out of his mouth, hit the mug, and then went back into his face when the mug hit him. It was wicked awesome. Now mind you, I'm completely hammered, but as far as New York bros were concerned, I came out of freaking nowhere like an inebriated Batman, because at the time I was sitting at a table behind the whole group. Wingmanning is a subtle art, so this guy hits the floor bloody and sputtering. His other New York bro looks at me, mouth agape, and takes 2 steps back. And then I got jumped by the bouncers and was dragged out of the bar yelling, "Frick New York!" the entire way because I was too drunk to think of a good badass line. Not quite as bad as most of these stories, but I've got kind of a good one. Just to provide a bit of context, I'm a super skinny, wimpy, white male, and a really nice guy who you'd never expect to lash out at someone. Back in high school, there was this kid who liked to mooch off everyone else's lunch, just because he'd never bought or packed his own. You know, the whole, "I'm really poor, so you should definitely give me all your food. I need it more than you," routine. He wasn't really, he just liked to take our food because he could. Every now and again, I'd give him half a sandwich or something, because like I said, I enjoy being a nice person. But one day, I just snapped. He grabbed my whole lunch bag from right in front of me without even asking for anything, and before I even started to eat my own food. In an instant, I dove across the table, grabbed him by his shirt, pulled him completely over to my side, and growled, "Give me my fricking lunch back, butthole," in his face. I got it, and it was delicious. I'd call this a badass moment of mine because I'd never ever act out like that. I'm usually pretty submissive and soft about things. But gosh darn it, I was excited for my little Debbie's and ham sandwich, and I wasn't going to let some butthole take them from me. All of my friends were totally shocked too. They had no idea I was even capable of sticking up for myself like that. Guess that's one way to keep people from messing with you. Among many of my security jobs, I've worked loss prevention for 2 major retailers. For those wondering, loss prevention is essentially catching shoplifters. Eventually, you just kind of know who to watch and who not to. One day, my partner, a female, and I started to watch this guy. Early 20s, overly muscled and spray-tanned, with a Guido Jersey Shore haircut and a muscle shirt. He is, of course, looking at other muscle shirts in the store. We see him select 5 shirts, go into the fitting room. Long story short, we know that he steals 8 of those shirts eventually, and me and my co-workers are with him acting as an arguing couple the whole time. He eventually goes to leave the store, which is when we can stop him. So we get in front of him at the doors, identify ourselves, and ask him to come with us. Now, I normally slouch a lot, but I'm 6'4". So the kid gets in my face, saying he didn't do anything, and if I don't move, he's going to kick my butt. So all I did was stare at him and say, "Make a decision about what you're going to do, and we'll go from there." Totally calm, with a straight face. He kind of blinked and got a weird look in his eye and asked me, "What?" So I repeated myself. I said, "Make a decision about what you're going to do, and we'll go from there." He kind of sat there for a few seconds and leaned back a bit and started catcalling my female co-worker instead. At that point, I snapped my fingers and told him to pay attention to me. After that, we placed him in handcuffs and led him to the office for processing. Since then, I've used that line multiple times at other LP, security jobs, and even at bars. The only time anyone has ever done anything after that was a patient from a mental hospital I worked at who was schizophrenic, and at that point, it didn't matter what I said. 60% of the time, it works every time. I too have a security job story. It was getting late, the store is about to close, Lord & Taylor, when I see a guy who doesn't look like he'd be buying the types of clothes that are sold there. He walks in and starts browsing the dress shirt section. Me and my fellow co-workers see him pick up about 10 shirts and proceed to walk into the dressing room with them. Now, you think that a smart thief may hide 1, 2, or maybe 3 in their pants if they're super ballsy. No, this man decides to stuff 10 dress shirts down into his pants, making him look like he has similar-sized quads as Ronnie Coleman himself. At this point, I stop him right away, say that we know he's trying to steal all the shirts, and ask him kindly to put them back. This is when things start heating up. The man says he has a deadly transmitted disease, pulls out a syringe and says that anyone that tries to get in his way is going to get stuck. I obviously don't want any part of this, so I back up and was going to let him go. Normal protocol is that you're not allowed to touch a customer inside the store, even if you do know they're stealing. This is when I hear clothes dropping on the floor and the sounds of metal hangers rattling. My coworker decided that 10 shirts was not leaving the store and he was going to stop this man. Out of left field, I see a metal bar come slamming into this man with the force of 100 men. He gets knocked unconscious, cops are called, the man gets arrested, and all was made right in the world. I wasn't really bad, but my coworker surely was. If your coworker did that to stop him from sticking someone with a needle, then he's pretty cool. If he did it to prevent a theft, then he's a fricking moron. I'm inclined to agree with that final commenter. I love a good defeat the bad guy story, but endangering yourself and your retail coworker like that to save some shirts isn't worth it. I was in downtown Houston skating around with some friends when I told them I had to stop and pee. So I walked into a narrow alley and started peeing. I didn't see these 2 girls just smoking cigarettes, staring at my dong. So I looked at them and smiled. Right as I finished up, a couple of D-bags came up and just started talking crap to them. Typical wanna frick you, got a pretty mouth, dumb craps. So I started to walk over and break that crap up when a guy looks at me and says, "What the frick do you think you're gonna do, B-word?" So I just started talking in a low voice in German, just repeating lyrics from Rammstein, making it sound like a threatening sentence instead of a song. Then they freaked out because I'm a tall, fairly muscular motherfricker. They left and the girls said thanks and asked me what I said, and I told them, I don't know, and I left. I was with some guys and we were all drunk. We walked out of a bad greasy spoon at 3 a.m. and ran into some guys walking into the restaurant, also drunk. I was the last in my group and I accidentally rubbed shoulders with the first guy in that group. Immediately, he starts talking crap, but I just ignore him and keep walking to the parking lot. I'm about halfway to my car when he says something that particularly offends me, because it was targeted at one of the girls with us. I turn around and seconds later, we're in the middle of a blank spot in the parking lot with our friends off to the sides. Eye to eye, he finally realizes that I'm a pretty big guy. We have a tense silence for a few seconds, then under my breath I quietly say, "You're gonna say, frick this guy, he ain't worth it. You're gonna turn around, walk away, and rejoin your friends. And you're gonna do that because if you don't, you won't need to eat, because I'm gonna feed you your frickin' shoes." About 5 seconds passed before he said, "Oh, frick this guy, he ain't worth it," and rejoined his friends. Probably more of a D-bag thing than a badass thing, but oh well. I used to work at Starbucks in the city where a lot of trust fund kids like to hang out and act homeless. There was always a group of them who stood out the front of the store, and that was next to Starbucks, yelling at people and usually playing hacky sack with each other. They made it a habit of yelling at anyone who walked through their game, threatening them. Bunch of bullcrap. I was going to my shift one day, and I was in a rotten mood. There they were, playing that game in the middle of the sidewalk, blocking everyone. I walked right through them, interrupted the game, and they started to call me out. I kept walking until I felt the hacky sack hit me in the back. I picked it up and threw it on the roof of the Starbucks and walked into work. I work at a bar as a bouncer. I don't look like the biggest guy, but I do strength training regularly. I deal with buttholes on a nightly basis. One in particular caught my eye when he was literally screaming at his girlfriend inside my bar. I walked up to him and let him know that if he did that again, he would be picking garbage from his teeth. Him being drunk, he didn't listen, and as I'm clearing out the bar at bar close, I see him again across the bar near the front door, near the trash can filled with random bar crap and bottles. He yells at her again, reaches back and slaps her. She goes to the floor. I crushed a path through the patrons and he didn't see me coming. One punch KO'd him and he landed headfirst in the trash can. I then proceeded to put the rest of him in it, picked his girlfriend up off the floor and contacted the police. They laughed upon arriving at him still being in the trash can. What is the worst second-hand embarrassment you've had to suffer through? I was in a class with about 50 other people when this really nice quiet guy stood up and started to play Gangnam Style out of his phone and started doing the dance with a wide grin on his face. Nobody laughed, so he sat down after about 10 seconds of singing and dancing, and the lecturer proceeded to carry on with the lecture. Gangnam Style, frickin' hell. That brings me back to some bad memories. I worked in the ad industry, and every company suddenly wants to be in and go viral with Gangnam Style. A few good months after it hit its peak, those hours pleading with clients that filming their employees doing the dance was a bad idea, Lord help me. Yeah, he showed up to all the other lectures as usual for the rest of the semester, but just didn't really say anything. He was always quite reserved, so I didn't really notice a change in his behavior. Looking back on it, I do feel sorry for him because I used to listen to that song every day, and maybe I could have offered him a sympathy laugh, but at the time I thought he just looked like a bit of a member. In middle school, a kid decided to don his karate wear and break a brick for a talent show. This intense music starts playing and he comes out, bows his head and hi-ya! Hits the brick. It doesn't break. He tries a couple more times, it remains unperturbed. He stomps off the stage in tears. I'm sure to console him, people told him, "Nobody will remember this in 10 years. It's been more than 10 years. I still remember him as the kid who couldn't break the brick. Stuck on a cruise ship for 3 days after my friend proposed to his girlfriend on the first fricking day, and she said no. The same first night she made out with a random guy in the hot tub. I'm honestly not sure how devastated my friend actually was, but it was intensified by the fact that he had drunk himself insensible by 2 p.m. every day, which would lead to him going to beg her to get back with him. At one point, she was sitting on the new guy's lap at the bar, and he grabbed her hand and confessed his love for her, for what must have been the 5th time in 2 days. It was a constant battle of trying to pull him away and convince him to either go to sleep or come with us to another part of the ship. He is a good friend, so I felt terrible for him because that was super crappy on her part, and tried to help him all he would allow, but it was awful to watch. And by the end of the cruise, it seemed like the entire boat knew what had happened. When I tried to bring it up with my girlfriend, who was on the cruise with me as well, days after we got home, she straight up refused to talk about it, saying that it was painful enough at the time, so we never need speak of it. I mean, honestly, it sounds like that was a good relationship to get out of if that's how both parties behaved. Some commenters expanded on this theory below. Was the proposal an attempt to save the relationship? Guys often propose when they feel the person slipping away from them. A common case is a girl wanting to back away from any serious commitment, but the guy actually wants it. I feel like this isn't 100% of the whole story here. No story that makes someone out to be that much of a victim is 100% the whole story. Like, I'm sure it was super messed up, but every situation has two stories. I think on a ship, each story is called a deck, actually. Have this uncle who's extremely cheap and once took us out to dinner. After he got the bill, he asks for the menu again and takes out his calculator and starts double-checking the bill prices and menu prices. This goes on for 15 minutes while the waiter patiently waits next to the table. At the end, he realizes he forgot his wallet and asks us to pay. I don't think I've ever tipped that generously. He didn't forget. No crap. We have printed tip suggestions ranging from 18 to 25% with the amount the tip would be and the total your bill would come to at the bottom of our receipts at my job. They're mainly for people who don't want to calculate it in their head or people from cultures that don't tip. But some people really believe that you have to tip one of those exact amounts and want to speak to a manager about being swindled. Even when we explain that they're suggestions, they somehow think they're requirements. Airline pilot here. The captain and I had a guy from another airline riding in the jump seat between us in the cockpit of a US airline jet. The captain was a bit of a blowhard loudmouth and decided to make a comment when he saw an Air India plane. You know, what I hate most about Indian women is the big red dot on their forehead. The jump seater said, "My wife is Indian," and produced a photo from his wallet of his family, including his Indian wife with the bindi on her forehead. The captain only made it worse while he squirmed by asking some crap like, is she from Eastern India or Southern India? Because I'm referring to the ones from... And my mind was cringing so horribly I blanked out on the rest of the conversation.
Oh, so he wasn't a racist, just a regular racist.
Recently went to a wedding where the groom had 5 or 6 different groomsmen, and they all gave a speech. The first few were pretty good and funny. The last guy that went tried way too hard to make it funny. He started off with some lame cliché joke about how the bachelor party was crazy and that they'd never talk about it again. He actually paused and waited for laughter, and not a single person laughed out of over 150. Then his hands started shaking and he kept losing his place. I think he eventually gave up after about 2 minutes of torture and just said, "To the bride and groom." It was horrific. Was at a friend's brother's 21st and was standing around talking with some other guys. On the driveway, a bunch of girls were dancing to the music. It was a really chill night, but it was about to get a lot chillier. The guy next to me said to the guy on the other side, "How about the rack on that blonde chick?" The other guy replied, "That's my daughter." The first guy mumbled something and left at a brisk walk.
It can be worse, believe it or not.
My significant other was helping his mum reminisce by looking at her old sports team photos from when she used to play hockey. Significant other and his mate both point and go, "Whoa, who's that one?" And of course, it was her. She was apparently really flattered by it, though. I mean, Freudian complexities aside, it's just nice that the person gave their mum a nice esteem boost for a while. Probably a good thing that the friend was there to place the blame on. When I was in the 7th grade in Texas history class, we had an in-class assignment in groups of 3 that required us to read a passage from the textbook and then summarize it in a skit for the class. I was grouped with a good friend who we call Karen and a girl who was known for being really socially awkward, who we will call Janice. Janice was that type of socially awkward girl that tried really hard to be cool, but failed miserably while wearing a Naruto headband every single day. Our passage was about cattle herding, and for some reason Janice got it into her head that it would be hilarious to hum the Star Wars theme song, but instead of regular humming, moo it. She wanted to moo the Star Wars theme song at the end of the skit. She tried to convince us, but Karen and I did not want to get destroyed by our classmates, so we refused. When it was our turn, we completed our skit and started to head back down, and Janice looks at us and screams, "Please!" And we both just shook our heads. She burst into tears and explained to us that she wanted to do something cool for the performance, but we refused, so could she just please do it on her own? The teacher told her to go ahead. Janice, still sobbing, stood in front of the class and mooed the entire Star Wars theme song, but the tune was unrecognizable since she was sniffing and gasping in between moos. So we all just kind of sat there for a solid 5 minutes watching this girl in a Naruto headband bawl and moo. 2 stand out from one high school English class. A dude got called out by our teacher for plagiarizing while he gave a report in front of a class in a book we read. In particular, she asked what "in lay thinking" meant, and he stood there for a good 10 seconds of silence before she lectured everyone on not copying from other sources. Another kid in our grade died from taking too many substances. He was pretty popular, and his death shocked the school for a good while. Several of his closest friends were in this class. The day after his death, our teacher was out sick, and we had a substitute. Naturally, she called out this guy's name during roll call. That hushed the class to the point of searing awkwardness, and some guy started sobbing. You could still see the slow dawning horror on the sub's face. You managed to trigger a cringe that had been blocked by my mind since it happened in 1997. Holy crap. 7th grade, a kid 2 grades above us died in a car accident. It really shook up the small town as he was a partying drunk and he and his friends went driving. Very much one of those "can't happen to our town" kinds of things. Cue roll call in social studies the day after the funeral. A kid in our grade shared a very common first name with the kid who died. Teacher says, "James?" Before James can even say "here," frickin' Isaac yelled out, trying to be funny, "How can he be here? He just died!" Absolute silence. I mean, what the frick do you say to that? And in case you haven't cringed into oblivion yet, this was the day that the dead kid's sister, who was in our grade, returned to school. She was going to take more than the week and a half to recuperate, but liked being around friends to help her get through it. My sister was on a first date with some guy she met online, and was nervous, so she had my significant other and I meet up with them. The guy was super braggy about being able to speak German, not knowing that my significant other was raised there and speaks it fluently. So my significant other tries to start a conversation with him in German. The guy apparently only spoke a few words of German and left embarrassed and without any chance of a second date. My significant other still feels a little guilty about it. Ich bin ein zwanghafter Lügner. Watching a friend be punished by their parents. It's so frickin' awkward. Oh my god, when I was 7 or 8 at a friend's house and he said crap while we played Mario Kart and his mum heard from the other room. She pulled him over her knee and started to give him a smacking on the rump. So I immediately tried to leave and the mum said, "Don't worry, he deserves this, you can stay." I was really weirded out and left anyways. As I closed the door behind me, my buddy was giving me a look that I'll never forget. I have a friend, Jake, who's partially deaf and he has hearing aids to help with that. We're cameramen and we were live streaming a college basketball game. We wear headsets to speak through the crowd and he has to take his hearing aids out to use it. He and I were taking a break during half-time and an old man who had a bag of candy, already weird, right, walked up to us and offered it to Jake. Jake, who still had his hearing aids out. Jake accepts this as the man giving us a bag of candy when in reality he just offered a piece to each of us. Yep, plenty weird. Jake just walked off with the candy bag, munching away as the old man helplessly tried to follow him through the crowd, yelling, No, I just meant to take one, Jesus Christ! I was uncomfortable in so many ways, I just walked away from the situation. Sounds like I need to get a fake hearing aid so I can just grab stuff and go. Actually, no, that would be morally condemnable. Tempting, though. I was on a train going between London and Manchester, UK, and went to use the bathroom. The toilet at the end of the carriage was disabled accessible, so it had a wide curved door that automatically opened at a steady and slow pace. About 20 to 30 seconds to completely uninterruptible retracting in a semicircle to allow wheelchair access to the carriage. If you've travelled on these trains before, you'll know that to close the door, you enter the stall, push a button to close the door, then when it's finished closing, you press another to lock it. Someone had not told this to the lady in the loo. Just as I arrive, another person coming from the other direction pushed the outside button to open the door, and it started its inevitable arc. For at least 30 excruciating seconds, the button pusher, myself, and eventually everyone sitting in the packed commuter carriage behind, who was facing in our direction, got to see the woman bend up from the seat, reach and hop to the other side of the cubicle, and desperately pummel the door, close, and lock buttons inside. Pants around the ankles the whole time, white bottom flashing. At a merciless pace, the door opened fully, contemplated its life, and then closed on the pitiful image within. The button pusher and I looked at each other, said nothing, and went back to our seats. I've seen this happen before. The poor guy got revealed like some crap prize on a game show. You'll never expect what's going to be behind door number 2. It's a guy going number 2. I'm usually the subject of first-hand embarrassment, but this time, a local radio station I listened to hosted some kind of Christmas charity event, where the DJs stood outside some kind of children's charity drive and talked about it to the people giving donations. They'd been playing music in between, asking people their names and talking about how much stuff they'd given, like, "Thanks to Dave from Cityville for the $300. Say hi, Dave." Dave, hi, you're welcome, happy holidays, bye. The cringe begins when a guy named Josh comes in to give some money to the charity. The DJ, "Wow, Josh has given us $3,000, the most generous donation of the day." Josh, "Yeah, haha, I did. So how much do you have now?" DJ, "Thanks again, Josh. I think that puts us at 10,000. Josh, No. I mean, after what I gave you, how much do I have?" DJ, "We have $10,000 in donations." Josh, "No, I mean, what number did my donation put you over?" At this point, I've gone from confusion to realizing what Josh is trying to get the DJ to say. I'm actually facepalming for him. DJ, "Well, before you donated, we had about 8,000. Josh, No, that's not what I mean." DJ, I don't quite know what you're getting at, Josh. Josh, "Get it? Now you have over 9,000! DJ, what? Josh, "Get it? After what I gave you, you have over 9,000. DJ, "Yeah, I don't. Like, there's this show called Dragon Ball Z, and the guy in it, he says over 9,000. Oh, right, yeah. All right then. Basically, a guy donated thousands in charity over the radio to just get the DJ to say, we have over 9,000. I'm pretty sure they didn't get the joke, and he tried to explain it to them. I don't remember a lot of the details or the exact amount, but I'm pretty sure the guy donated in the thousands. Government class senior year. Teacher makes a comment about how we should stay off our phones in class and be careful about the things we send out. Proceeds to pull up a classmate's tweet that says something along the lines of, "This teacher is so dumb, this class freaking sucks." She was on her phone, so she didn't see it pulled up immediately. When the whole class fell silent, she finally looked up and turned bright red. The teacher kind of chuckled and continued on with the lessons. To be fair, that teacher had amazing timing. I always get this when I watch guys hit on girls unsuccessfully. One particularly painful example was a good friend of mine who is not the best when it comes to flirting, and he had just come out of a long-term relationship, so safe to say he was rusty. At any rate, he makes a beeline toward this girl. I try to intervene and assure him it will not work out. She was seeing someone, and her friend told me that my friend, currently making moves towards her, weirded her out a little. I pleaded and pleaded with him to just refrain from doing it, but he was having none of it, as he thought I just wanted to take a stab myself. Anyway, I watched helplessly as he moves towards her, slides up and attempts to hold her hand. She looks mildly scared, so he says to her in a fairly loud voice, "Don't worry, I'll hold you." At this point, I have to look the other way as I'm actually dying of embarrassment for him. She then slowly starts moving away, looking quite fearful, and then briskly walks outside. He comes back over and asks if he should go for her friend instead. Just remembered another story from the same guy around the same time. This time he had managed to pull, and he was cracking onto this girl and she was reciprocating, putting her hands on his leg, giving him the occasional kiss. Anyway, he gets incredibly smashed, and we're walking with a group of friends to another bar. The woman in question is walking behind us with her friend. He says incredibly loudly, "I am so in there, bro. 10 out of 10. Easy." She's obviously well within earshot. We arrive at the next bar, and she comes up to him and says, "Were you talking about me?" I've never seen someone look so on the spot. He stammers some answer about not meaning it like it sounded. At any rate, safe to say, this killed the vibe for a bit. She sort of distances herself from him. Undeterred, he continues to drink and attempts to start up conversations with her. Feeling a little bit freaked out, she asks her friends to leave. Now, they lived about 1 kilometer away from this bar. They all leave. My friend excuses himself about 10 minutes later. We all ask him not to go to this woman's house. He promises not to, and being drunk, we let him go. About 20 minutes later, I get a phone call from one of this girl's friends saying that my friend is drunk in their house, which was their parents' house, and is refusing to leave. Mortified, we had to go and collect him, sort of half-yelling apologies at their house. Oof. I think we all know at least one guy like this. Generally, they grow out of it, and we're hopefully able to use these sorts of stories as cautionary and humorous tales for the rest of us. Used to be a bag boy at a grocery store. One day, I was bagging an older man's groceries, and the cashier begins to talk to him. In a polite voice, "Have you found everything you're looking for?" He gave no response. "Sir, have you found everything you're looking for?" No response. "Sir, have you found everything you're looking for?" The man, finally acknowledging the cashier, says, "Oh, hey, I'm deaf." The cashier apologized profusely, and the old man looked at her in disgust, while I did the brave thing and left to bring shopping carts back into the store. Sleeping over my friend's house in the 7th grade, I was trying to sleep on the floor. However, his parents decided to have very loud, wall-rattling fun times. I laid there trying to fall asleep for about 15 minutes when a loud shriek hinted that it was over. I kinda laughed a little, and my friend, who I thought was sleeping, just says, "I am so sorry." We awkwardly laughed about it, then went to bed. 3 women in a kitchen, one is pretty overweight and recently miscarried. I knew the third person didn't and started asking questions about how the pregnancy was coming along. I'm peeling carrots, just dying inside. The overweight woman who miscarried informed the woman that she lost the baby a month ago. I'm a coward and just pretended to focus on the carrots. Horrible. This was my freshman year of college in 2006. One of my Gen Ed class requirements was a minority studies class, and the only one left was women's studies. I figured it would be a perfectly okay class, and it honestly was. The problem was this guy in the class named Carter. Carter was the precursor to the modern-day "ladies, I must apologize for my gender, look at me, I'm such a good ally to women" guy, and every time he raised his hand, you could see a lot of people in the room cringe. He had said something dumb, and the professor had moved on to a new topic when he raised his hand again. He then said, "I just want to apologize for what my gender does to women." I feel like everyone in the class was staring a hole through their desks because of how utterly embarrassing this guy was. The professor said, "Okay, if that's all you wanted to say, let's move on," and oh lord, does thinking about that still make me cringe. Oh boy, I've got one. An integral part of my architecture education were what we call critiques or juries. Basically, you'd present your work in front of a group of your classmates and professors, to which questions could be asked and suggestions be offered. It was an incredibly valuable part of our education, as getting and offering feedback really encouraged more critical thought about what we were doing. Unfortunately, it also meant that if you produced crappy work, you'd get torn to pieces. Anyway, come our final jury presentations for the semester, this one guy pins up his presentation materials and physical model and gives his presentation. It was bad. Seriously bad. Aside from only taking up a quarter of his allotted time, it looked like his presentation materials were half finished, after a night of fervent scrambling to get the work done. There wasn't enough to even start to ask questions or give suggestions to him. So everyone, trying to think of at least something productive to say, kept completely silent. It was probably only 15 seconds, but it was absolutely the most awkward silence of my life. Eventually, one of the professors spoke up and said something along the lines of, "If this is the kind of work you think is acceptable, you probably shouldn't look at continuing this program." To which the guy just replied, "Sorry," and walked out. He didn't show up the next year. So yeah, I've never felt as awkward even in situations where I'm the subject of the awkwardness. Probably not that bad in the grand scheme of things, but it's been going on for months now. My friend will just blurt out guesses to questions in my physical chemistry class. She sits in the front row, and before anyone has a chance to answer if they actually know, she will just randomly guess. Over and over again. It's so awkward because she's almost always wrong, and the teacher asks her to explain, and she doesn't ever have a good reason for what she said. Watching pallbearers lose control of the coffin they were carrying down a steep set of granite church steps after the funeral was over. An ice or sleet storm took place during the funeral service, so the steps were slick. Several pallbearers went down as the coffin landed on the granite steps and slid the rest of the way down to the sidewalk below. Fortunately, the lid didn't open, but we all felt badly for them as the look on their faces showed they were mortified. What's the most real relationship advice you can give? It's fine to not always want to spend 100% of your time with your spouse. Not every moment of every day is going to be bliss, and sometimes it really takes some effort. I love my wife to bits, but there are some days when I would just like to do things by myself. It doesn't mean our relationship isn't great, but it can be really refreshing just to take a stroll around a shopping center, or go get some food alone or something. This 100%. My spouse goes to a weekly Pathfinder game. That's his alone time. I occasionally go to a punk show or have a beer with my friends. It can be even simpler. I will go read a book in the other room and get my alone time. He likes to cook, so he'll start up in the kitchen and I stay away while he listens to his music. Everyone needs alone time. Don't lose yourself as an individual in a relationship. Happened to me. Where were you 10 years ago? Ah, but would you have listened 10 years ago? I think it's so important to have your own social lives and circles, but I see so many couples who bring their partner to everything, to the point that they're basically a part of every social group that person is in. Where does that person then have an escape to? When can they go out with their friends without the other one feeling bad for not being invited? Keep your own circle. My partner and I have been friends for years, even before we were a couple, so we have the same friend group. I combat this by asking when he wants me to tag along to outings like shopping, and also we have pretty chill home life. Also, we're not attached at the hip at events, and I know when to step back and let him have one-on-one conversations. I try and let him know that it's okay for us to do our own thing and I won't be offended. Sometimes I worry that I'm too much and we're not getting enough alone time, but we communicate well and respect each other. So if it ever becomes an issue, it wouldn't be one for too long. Communication is key. Make sure you're talking to your partner and finding out what they need and telling them your needs too. Intimacy is way more important than people realize. Like I've told my wife, yeah, sure, there's lust involved, but there's also interest in making your partner feel good as well. If that interest isn't there, your partner might as well be an adult fun time toy for all they mean to you. This is where I think a lot of people miss the point. Everyone seems to automatically infer that it's physical intimacy that's important. Intimacy is emotional. It's meaningful and vulnerable sharing of one's inner self. It's not what you do in bed. That's not hard. Real intimacy is hard, and it's super fulfilling to be intimate with your partner. So important, and physical intimacy begets emotional intimacy. Physical intimacy is our biggest way of being there for each other. Everyone needs a hug, everyone needs cuddles. Words can't always do what a good, genuinely loving hug can do. Go on holiday together. If you can agree on food, sleep soundly, compromise on activities, and do your own thing one of the days, and not get mad at each other, you stand a good chance of lasting a while. I love my boyfriend to bits and miss him a lot. We don't live together yet, but boy do I like sleeping in my own bed sometimes. Space is healthy. Just because you're in a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to live in each other's pockets. Given the sheer amount of friends that I've discovered I can't stand traveling with, finding someone to meet this comment's criteria seems impossible. Oh dear. When you disagree, remember that you're on the same team. You're supposed to fight a problem, not the other person.
This is such an awesome way of putting that concept. 1. Don't expect the other person to be able to read your mind. 2. Be a team, not opponents. 3. Everybody toots at some point.
Number 3 has been a hard thing for me during my current relationship. My significant other has a colostomy bag after battling colon cancer, which has been a huge learning experience in itself. I'm all for being comfortable with the body and all of its weird, icky processes, and I'm usually quick to make that known. But knowing that he physically can't toot makes me way more reluctant to do it around him. Like, I don't want to be a show-off, you know?
My husband blames his toots on the baby sometimes, and for some reason I think it's hilarious to imagine a 7-month-old making that kind of gas.
I know I found the right person. It wasn't easy though, damn. Communication is the foundation upon which everything else is built. They say don't go to bed angry, not because anger does something while you're sleeping, but because it means you didn't communicate properly and you're giving up on trying. Be calm, actively listen, do not dismiss your partner's statements, assume good faith. It's you and me versus the problem, not me versus you. If something's bugging you, talk to your significant other about it. If you feel enraged about something, wait until you're well-fed, well-rested, with warm extremities before talking about it, but talk about it at the first opportunity, calmly, rationally, and honestly. Keep the discussion limited to that one narrow thing. If something's bugging your significant other, hear them out. Never think, well, I'm not bothered by that, so it's not a problem. Think, my significant other is bothered by this, and that's a problem. If you think the concern is unreasonable, frame the discussion as solving the problem of your significant other is being unhappy. The worst fights and arguments happen over trivial things because it's not the trivial thing that's actually causing the problem. It's probably a series of things or a general lack of satisfaction, and the toothpaste cap being left off is just the instigator of the fight. If you communicate often and openly, these things will not fester, they won't pile up, and you won't get into such fights. Your spouse isn't going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. There will be mistakes and misunderstandings. What really matters in a relationship is not being perfect, but how you handle the imperfections of yourself and your spouse in a respectful, reasonable way. Learning how to be bored together is important. You don't have to be on the go, doing stuff and planning stuff and being fun and exciting all the time. It's okay to just sit around and not do anything and not talk to each other. It's not unhealthy, I promise.
This was one of the biggest things I learned when I moved in with my significant other and what I give as advice to couples just moving in. Especially when it's their first time living with a significant other, you have to learn how to be in the same room without actively hanging out together. When your whole relationship has been dates, it's hard to just be without feeling like you should be interacting. Getting comfortable just chilling there, doing your own thing is a good thing. There's so much pressure to do stuff, especially in the age of social media. Other couples do stuff all the time, and everyone is looking for adventures. We must keep up with the carefully manufactured images of other people put out on Instagram. In reality, it's not necessary and can often be a serious source of stress. My husband has been playing Ark all day, and I've been on Reddit or playing The Sims. We watched a couple of episodes of 10th Kingdom earlier, and that's all we've done together today. We're in the same room, but we're not doing the same things. This is not a bad thing. It's called being comfortable together. As someone who just started an official relationship, I got a glimpse of this when I went to visit my boyfriend's place about a week ago. I asked if I could try Overwatch on his PC, since I only have the console version, and he seemed happy to let me go ahead and do my own thing. He booted up Diablo on the couch, and I played a couple of matches. I asked him, "Are you sure this is okay? I can totally get off and spend time with you." He replied, "You're enjoying yourself, right? I'm totally cool just doing my own thing. Just because one of us visits doesn't mean we have to spend every minute together." It made sense when he put it like that, and actually depicts what I've heard about other relationships even when the couples aren't cohabiting. A relationship where I can just be okay playing Baldur's Gate for several hours at a time seems pretty damn good to me. That's the goal. It's interesting when people get confused by this. I always considered relationships to be autonomous. We should both be able to live our own lives, but us being together makes it better. At the same time, romantic relationships are just that. You should be dating your best friend. Your best friends sometimes do nothing with each other. My friend and I once got into a study room after class and did our homework for literally 2 hours with minimal talking. I looked at her around 1 in the afternoon and asked if she's hungry, and we grabbed lunch. It's kind of the same thing. You have to be honest with them, especially when it's hard to do. Me and my boyfriend get uncomfortably real with each other sometimes, and something we've both learned is to listen to criticism without getting defensive. And when giving criticism, we don't attack each other, no matter how angry or sad we are at each other. I've had him call me out for certain behaviors that nobody has ever called me out on, and I've done the same for him. We're both better people for it because when we get it all out on the table, we have no choice but to work on ourselves. There's a reason it's called the honeymoon phase, and eventually you won't have as much to talk about other than how the day went, or might not always feel those butterflies in your stomach when you think about them. That's when it becomes a test in the relationship, and you both have to work on it to make it work. You'll get into fights, but learn to get over them, or I doubt it will last. Resentment can kill feelings for someone. I wanted to add, I'm not a love or relationship expert by any means. I'm just going off things I've seen and gone through with my own husband. You trade butterflies for familiarity, excitement for comfort. I love the comfort stage. The butterflies are great and all, but being in a constant state of infatuation would get exhausting after a few years. It's so nice to do absolutely nothing with your person, or not see them for a day or two if you don't live together, and still be completely content with them. In an ideal relationship, the contributions are 60-40, where both partners are the ones trying to give 60%. My mom asked an elderly couple who'd been married for decades what their secret was. They said that they act as if being nice to each other is a competition. That's always stuck with me. I've been married for 28 years. When I was engaged, a dear lady, then in her 80s and still very much in love with her husband of 60+ years, told me this: "Just because he's your husband, don't think he requires less regard than your friends. Before you yell at him for something, anything, ask yourself if you would yell at your friend for the same thing." What she was trying to say is that being married, together, is not a free pass to stop being a decent human being. You're going to get annoyed by the socks on the floor, but is it an excuse to fly off the handle? Respect and common courtesy are my recommendation, and you don't need to keep score. There's no winner. I can't praise this enough. I see couples snap at each other all the time over the silliest stuff and wonder how it must feel to be constantly on guard like that. Just be nice to each other. If you can't stand to be nice to each other, call it a day, man. Life is too short. My husband and I have to check in on each other every once in a while. For some reason, it seems like I'm meaner to my husband when my family is around, and he's meaner to me when his family is around. We come up with a phrase that we whisper if we're in public: "Quit being a butthole." We use it to remind each other to be nice without having to justify ourselves at the moment. It really works because if he says it to me, I automatically check myself, even if I don't think I'm being mean. I love him and I never intend on coming off as a butthole. Listen to them, communicate with them, compromise sometimes, and frick them regularly. To elaborate on compromise, it doesn't always mean something we'll both enjoy.
At times, it will very likely mean today we do something that my partner likes and that I sparingly tolerate, but tomorrow that reverses. My ex refused to see that side of a compromise. I would see horror films with her, because to me, spending time with her was more important than avoiding seeing a horror film. If I wanted to see a film that she wouldn't like, asking her to see it with me was forcing her to do something that she didn't want, and was therefore unfair. And for the love of God, do not start dating a new person as a way to get out of a bad relationship. That is extremely unfair to the new person you entered into a relationship with. Guy here, this probably sounds simple, but here's what I've learned. Know yourself, where you're at in life. If you're in a crap storm, legal crap, money crap, substances and booze crap, legal crap, you're probably not ready for anything serious. Clean up your act first. Be honest. No matter how fricked up your crap is, if you want to move forward in a serious way, all the cards have got to be on the table. Take it slow, get to know each other, but in the end, no secrets. There is some crap that's nobody's business, but I'm not talking about that. Know her, what she's been through, and what she wants out of life. You both need to be pretty much on board. You need to be heading for the same thing. Kids, buy a house, or gypsy life, doesn't matter. Keep an eye on things. You need to make sure she's doing okay, and let her know you're doing okay. Same with her to you. After that, it's just dodging stupid. Sometimes you have to spend years with crappy people to realize what you deserve. It was never a waste. You needed the experience to figure out what works best for you or what to avoid. You'll never forget your exes. They were there for a reason. Good to get something from the School of Hard Knocks on here. A lot of these is from people who seem to have been happily married or together for a long time. Sometimes you have to muddle your way through until it works. Relationships are work. They aren't always fun, you won't always be madly in love, and you can't put them on a shelf and ignore them. No, but you shouldn't shun the work. Too many of my friends are toxic in their relationships, ending them summarily just because any work is seen as too much. Or let relationships turn toxic because it's easier than maintaining healthy ones. Always be mindful and thoughtful to that person's love map. Like they might need a quick text every morning when you get to work letting them know that you're safe. It makes zero sense to you, but knowing it's something small and means the world to them, well, why the hell not? They might get stressed out, and you helping clean the house for when they finished work might mean more to them than someone else you've been with who wanted flowers to show love. Know what it is that your partner loves and make them feel loved too. And if it's just a text to say you love them and you're safe, it's a 10-second message to type. For frick's sake, that's so little time in the span of an entire day. Why not do it if you know that it makes them happy? A little off topic, but I've found that prioritizing the relationship correctly helps a lot. My roommate is my best friend, but he's a roommate first, a coworker second, and a friend third. We talk about finances and housework completely differently than we shoot the crap. This helps maintain efficient lines of communication regardless of what's going on. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. If they're mean, if they're vindictive, if they use you, if they show you that they don't really care about you, believe them. If they make you feel inadequate, on edge, scared, nervous, unworthy, or like a disappointment, believe them. If they're entitled, narcissistic, sociopathic, manipulative, or unfair, believe them. Life isn't a movie, and you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. More often than not, they're just who they are. So take off the rose-colored glasses and stop thinking love will find a way. If it isn't working, change it. Don't spend your precious time lamenting over a person who wouldn't genuinely lament over you. This sounds bleak, I know, but relationships and love are supposed to be the most beautiful things in the universe. If your relationship is not improving your quality of life on the aggregate, you need to seriously reassess what you want in life, because you deserve better. You only get so much time to find people in your life that make it worth living. Don't get caught up on people who will make you wish you'd never lived it. Yes, you gotta make sure you're choosing them as advertised, not falling in love with their potential. Don't think your perspective is bleak at all. I think it's balanced and disillusioned. In related vernacular, choosing to believe who someone is a great example of living life on life's terms. It's not always easy, but it gets you out of a lot of unnecessary wrestling matches. Probably not going to get this right, but it hit me the hardest after spending 5 years in a toxic relationship. The idea that everyone in their lives is working toward creating a jigsaw, each part of their life, be it work, relationships, or hobbies, make up parts of that jigsaw. Everyone's is different. Some people's careers make up the edges, the less important and interesting parts. Some people's are their relationships. What's important is the center of the puzzle. That's what people are working towards, their life's goals. When you're in a relationship, your puzzles combine. You eventually start working towards a shared goal. You might make some compromises on what goes to the outer edges, but you should both be working toward the same center. Occasionally, it turns out that the centerpiece you were working towards with your significant other isn't what you thought it was. This sucks, believe me, it really freaking does, but there's nothing wrong with cutting your losses. If you're going for a different jigsaw and the pieces don't fit, you won't get a coherent picture. I hope I explained it right, and yes, it's been taken from Daniel Sloss. He puts it way better than I do, so I would recommend checking him out on Netflix. If you go into a marriage or long-term commitment with the impression that you'll be happy all the time and your life will only change for the better, you're absolutely wrong. Be realistic that there will be days where you won't be able to stand each other, your lives may absolutely hit rough patches, and you will not agree on how or why that situation occurred, or even how to get out of it, and the like. Came here to say this, and when you have kids it tends to get even more difficult and adds even more fights and resentment. Life changes, and so do relationships. The butterflies and weak knees only last so long, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. Don't just look for the person who makes your heart race, look for someone who you can also see being best friends with. Because in the end, that's what you become, best friends. Friends fight, but best friends always, or usually, find a way to work through it together. Oh, and it's also my experience that having one shared hobby and one independent hobby helps too. My husband and I game together, but if I need a break from him or vice versa, I'll go read a book and he'll watch sports or whatever. A study of long-term relationships found that successful relationships have one major thing in common. The spouses are verbally supportive of each other's interests and thoughts. For example, if your spouse is very excited about Pokemon Go and wants to tell you all about the monsters that they caught that day, the supportive spouse would listen to them talk about it and be excited for what they're excited about, even if they don't know how the game's played or they think that it's stupid. The couple that's going to divorce, that other spouse would say, "I don't care, that game's for kids," or be generally dismissive of the conversation and change topics. Support what they're excited about as much as you can, even if it's just listening with a smile on your face while you do a shopping list in your head. Without bypassing the obvious one, which is the importance of communication, my mother always told us how you say something is as important as what you're saying. From the tone to how a subject is approached or delivered can make the difference between opening a dialogue or having an argument. Another good one I've seen around Reddit, it's you, plural, versus the problem. If your significant other has a healthy relationship with their ex, especially when they have kids together, it's a good sign. Don't go to sleep angry is bullcrap, especially if you have little kids. If you and your partner are sniping at one another, disengage and get some sleep if it's possible. Most of the fights my husband and I ever had was because one or both of us were exhausted or hangry. But set a time to pick it back up, please. If my husband just says frick it and goes to bed during an argument, I'm angry. If he says, "I need sleep, let's talk tomorrow after dinner," I'm much better. I need to know it's going to be resolved in a timely fashion, and we're both much more reasonable after sleep and cooling down. Choose them. It's not about winning an argument, making a point, having enough time, or giving enough gifts, any of that crap that makes your heart either soar or tremble in the moment. It's about choosing them, knowing them, learning them. Equally as crucial, they choose you back. It's about choosing this person to hold your hand through every moment of every day for the remainder of anything and everything you'll ever experience. Every decision you make has them as a factor. It's about respect and admiration and giving credit where it's due. It's about the truth, about trusting them with the truth, and trusting them to tell it. Choose them, completely. Relationships are not there to fix you. If you aren't happy with yourself, the relationship won't make that a reality. When you want your partner to be fit, attractive, and dress well, don't forget that they want that as well. Want the best for the other person, not for yourself. That's why jealousy is poison. You want your significant other to look good, but only for you? Get a clue. Give them something to want in return. Be a success. Take care of yourself. Learn something every day. Don't waste your time. Be kind and demonstrate that daily. You get what you give. Do the dishes. What's the best witty comeback you've ever witnessed? Back in 10th grade, we had a long-term substitute physics teacher, younger guy, so the tough guys in class wanted to have a pee-pee measuring contest with him, like daily. They constantly made fun of him and joked about his wife. One day, I didn't hear the start of it, but one kid said something like, "I'll bury my face in your wife's chest." Teacher had obviously had enough and said, "No, the only D's you're ever going to see are your grades." The class exploded, nobody ever told on the teacher for saying that, and the guys stopped messing with him. Could a teacher even get in trouble for saying something like that at your school? They certainly wouldn't at mine. They were given wide latitude, especially if provoked. The only case of a teacher getting in trouble for crap was when a math teacher hit a kid for saying something about his, the teacher's, girlfriend. In other words, physical violence could get a teacher in trouble. Words, other than presumably slurs or maybe things that were entirely unprovoked, couldn't. Our geography teacher didn't even use our names, just called us little craps, vermin, emo kid with shampoo deficiency, etc. And we loved her. Sitting in a bar in a country well known for working girls, a guy walks in and starts yelling at a girl, "B-word, you gave me VD." She looked at him and said, "No, I didn't, you bought it." That guy got burned twice. I miss my late uncle. He was the wittiest motherfricker I ever knew. Not a joke teller, just had great one-line comebacks that were never mean, just funny. My favorite was when he went out to eat at a diner with his wife and my mum, just the three of them. The waitress said to him, "Lucky you get to eat with two ladies." My uncle replied, "Yeah, but can you hurry it up? I have to get home to my wife." My Uncle Bob was in a jewelry store a few years ago to buy a present for his longtime girlfriend. They'd been together for over 10 years and had a kid. The manager of the store was helping him as they were fairly busy, and she was called away on some managerial task and handed him to another employee, saying, "Would you help this man? He's looking for a bracelet for his wife." And my uncle said, "Oh no, this is for my girlfriend. I wouldn't spend money like this on my wife." He said the following stunned silence was deafening. He's also pretty deadpan, so they probably thought he was serious. "He seems like a funny guy." Could have been the same guy that came into my restaurant, and when asked by the hostess how he was, he replied, "Well, my wife and girlfriend have left me, so I'm looking for 2 new girls." I mean, let's hope that last one was a joke. There's something to be said for being comfortable enough with your relationship to pull these jokes off directly in front of your spouse, like the first guy did. My mum's dad passed away a couple of days previously. The night before the funeral, a dark and stormy night, the funeral home called 9 p.m. to tell my mother she had forgotten a tie for the suit for tomorrow's showing. She freaked out, realizing that she would have to drive over to the nursing home to fetch a tie and then drive to the funeral home. Dad, who loved himself his clip-on ties and had many of them, said, "Oh, don't go doing that trip on a night like tonight at this time of night. Just grab one of my clip-on ties and take it with you in the morning." My mum, who actually hated that my dad had never learned to tie a tie, responded without missing a beat, "My father would never be caught dead wearing a clip-on tie." Seconds after she realized what she said, she burst into tears. Savaged from beyond the grave. Ow! Grandpa, "In my day, kids were seen and not heard." Grandson, "So are the movies." Was talking to a friend about preferred positions in bed with a partner, and he said, "I like being on the bottom because all I do is frick up anyways." Classic self-roast. Not witnessed firsthand, but heard the recounting or legend many times. Growing up, a friend's older brother nearly got kicked out of high school for this exchange. The teacher, teaching about Jewish law around bestiality that's strictly forbidden, looks at a student and says, "Does this upset you, David?" David says, "Yeah, it means I can't do the deed with your wife anymore." He had to graduate late since he wasn't allowed back into that class. When I was training for my current job, our teacher chose to inform us that he and his wife had chosen not to procreate by saying, "All my children have 4 legs and tails." I have no idea where it came from, but I spat out, "Holy crap, I'd hate to see what your wife looks like." My class busted out laughing, teacher included. He went a little hard on me the next couple of days, but was a good sport in general. We had a lot of fun in that class, and a big part of that was all the crap slinging. Overly condescending boss looking over my work. "Can I ask a stupid question?" Me, on my last week at that job, "You seem overqualified." "You have a lot of options here." "Sure, I've seen you do it before. In my experience, yes. It's one of your core competencies." I stole this line from American Beauty and paraphrased it, but when my boss would say, "Hey, have you got a second?" I'd answer condescendingly, "For you, boss, I've got at least 30. He had a good sense of humor and thought it was funny every time. Works for, "Have you got a minute?" too. "For you, I've got 3. Another good response to, "Can I ask a stupid question?" is, "You just did. Do you need to ask another?" I had a supervisor who was making fun of a guy's last name. The guy took it and didn't really say anything. When he was done, the supervisor asked him to email him something, and the guy wanted to clarify the spelling of the supervisor's last name, which was Windsor. He said, "Your name doesn't have D in it, right?" The supervisor said no, so the guy said, "Okay, just ooshbag then," and then walked away. Overheard. First guy, braggart and jerk, I've got this great new job. I've got over 100 guys under me. Second, smartass, what are you, mowing lawns at a cemetery? How many are on top, is what I would have said. Comedian, I remember the first time I did the deed with someone. Girl in the audience, yesterday? Audience was laughing. Comedian, I'm glad you remember. Audience, screams. I saw that video too. The text really doesn't properly convey how much the audience laughed at the heckler's joke and how quickly and completely the comedian won the audience back. I was 13 in dance class with some older, catty girls. One of them was picking on me, which ended with her remarking, "Bite me." I responded with, "I'm trying to cut fat from my diet." Entire team heard it and proceeded to chastise me for being so mean. Served her right, the cow. Jimmy Carr was at another comedian's show and he started laughing. If you've seen him, you'll know how distracting that would be. The guy on stage, can't remember who it was, brutally savaged him with, "Jimmy, when I come to see your shows, I don't laugh at your jokes." Up until this moment, I've never appreciated how tough Jimmy Carr's strangled chicken of a laugh is to imitate. My apologies to the listeners. I remember some guy talking about this encounter he had in a grocery store. He was behind this woman who was giving the cashier a bunch of crap over something. She was being a real chump, and finally, sick of her attitude, he tells her to lighten up and stop holding up the line. He's getting kinda teed off that she's double-barreling this kid who's done nothing wrong. So she whips around on him and says, "This is none of your business." And he responds, "Listen, lady, I'm a veterinarian. B-words are my business." Don't know if that story's true, don't care. I thought it was amazing. Also effective, I'm a gynecologist. C-words are my business. I'm a proctologist. Buttholes are my business. Urologist works too. Members are my business. Guy in grade school was really into war history and building army models, fighter jets, aircraft, carriers, etc. He was quiet and smart, but handsome and part of the main crowd, athletic, etc., but very much a history/war buff. At a party, for whatever reason, he was kind of in an argument beef with one of the hotter and more popular girls in class. The greatest comeback I've ever heard was as follows. Girl, "Whatever, Dan, why don't you go play with your model planes?" Guy, immediately without missing a beat, "Great idea, I can land them on your flat chest." The reaction from the crowd added insult to injury as people went bonkers like it was a walk-off home run in a playoff baseball game. Never have I ever heard a better comeback, real or scripted, ever since. During middle school math class, one of the boys, overweight, was being made fun of by this petite girl. "You should put on a bra, you don't need it." "You should take off your bra, you don't need it." The class went, "Oh," and this guy got a few fist bumps. She cried. I've said a similar one. When I was at the beginning of the 7th grade, I didn't have any hair on my legs. This obnoxious girl noticed and said in front of everyone in the class, "Do you shave your legs?" real loud. I responded, "No, and by the looks of it, you don't shave yours either." Her smirk went to an instant frown, and the class went, "Whoa!" like you said, and the teacher laughed. Teacher was real chill. My grandfather died quite a bit before his time, and my grandmother would get a lot of calls for him. One telemarketing firm was particularly pushy, and one day an unbelievably condescending salesperson called and demanded to speak to the man of the household. My grandmother, who was normally restrained to a fault, replied, "Well, as soon as he comes back from the dead, I'll have him call you," and slammed down the phone. They actually did stop calling after that. A student told another one he wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box. That one responded with, "You're the sharpest because no one wants to work with you." Before you read on, please know that my relationship with my 14-year-old son is built on giving each other a hard time. I said a bad word, don't remember which or why. "You're a horrible mother." If I'm so horrible, how did you turn out so awesome? "I spent a lot of time with Dad." I got wrecked. "Son, can't wait to put you in a home." Me, "I should have drowned you in the bathtub." He's 21 and a butthole. My mum has a wicked sense of humor, and so does my brother. My brother is the middle child. My older sister and I would call my mum at least twice a day each. My brother would rarely call, which hurt her. She started telling him that I guess she failed as a mother and as he doesn't love her. He responded that she could always call him, which has led to at least 3 years of, "To my mother, cold and distant." Cakes, cards, text messages, you name it, from my brother. Had a really witty teacher from my game design class. The vice principal hated him for whatever reason. One day we were all studiously working with our headphones on, programming away while our teacher was up front reading a book. Very available and approachable if we had any suggestions. Then the VP walks into the room. VP, Mr. Teacher, it has come to my attention that you have absolutely no control over your class. This is unacceptable. Teacher gives him a fairly nonchalant stare, coolly and calmly places his book down, and claps his hands loudly 3 times, which was his very effective way of getting our attention while listening to music. Mind you, the following occurred without us knowing why the VP was there or what he'd said. Teacher, okay class, listen up. I've got an exercise for you. This'll only take a few minutes. First and foremost, everybody stand up. We all stood up in near unison very quickly. Good. Now all I want you to do is leave the room and stand outside in the hallway, and no matter what this guy says, as he points a finger at the VP, do not come back into the room until I say so. Okay, go. We all exit the room, a little intrigued by what was going on. Okay, VP, bring them back in the classroom. We didn't budge. To this day, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. That's a pretty big flex, to be honest, even if it's not quite in the neighborhood of the quick and snappy comebacks and the rest of the thread. Nice job though, teacher. When I was in high school, this very large, overweight kid who always picked on me waited till things got quiet in the classroom and said, "Dave eats wang." Everyone laughed and I got embarrassed and nervous, and a few seconds later, after people finished laughing, I stuttered out, "Yeah, well, you eat everything." I don't know where that came from, but holy crap, the entire room lost it. Haha. Special ed student. You're so dumb, you make me look like a genius. I was the instructional aide and had to stop the other kid from trying to fight him, but that burn was so sick it got a chuckle out of me. One of my prouder moments. I was 17 and a 12 or so year old kid came up to me. "Hey babe, can I have your number?" "Why? Do you need a babysitter?" Not exactly a comeback or insult, but once in biology class we were going over DNA and genetics. We were talking about how traits can be inherited from parents to offspring flowers, and how some could have all the same traits and some could have mixed traits. The packet we used called the same traits flowers purebred and the other ones mixed. Then a girl in the class asked a question. "Have we ever tried to make purebred humans?" Teacher, "Yeah, some Germans in the 30s and 40s tried to." "Really? What happened?" World War II, followed by laughter from the rest of the class. I remember reading the possibly apocryphal story of a student being told no excuse would be accepted for not taking a test that was the next day. Some student decided to be funny and said, "What about sheer exhaustion from all the climaxes?" To which the teacher replied quickly, "I guess you'll have to write it with your other hand then." Churchill and some lady were having an argument. Lady, "Winston, if you were my husband, I would put arsenic in your morning coffee." Churchill, "Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Oh boy, have I got an answer for this one. So I'm sitting in my chemistry class, and there's a dude sitting ahead of me, Jeff. He's just minding his own business when 2 other dudes behind me, Butthead 1 and Butthead 2, proceed to start calling his name and ignoring him whenever he turns around. Just trying to annoy him, I suppose. Important to note, Jeff is a pretty intelligent guy, whereas Butthead 1 and Butthead 2 are so inbred they could be a sandwich. After this happens a few times, Jeff finally turns around and drops this line. "Hey, Butthead 1, can I borrow one of your extra chromosomes?" Overheard 2 guys in a restroom while at the urinals. Guy 1 tries to embarrass Guy 2. Guy 1, "What's with that red ring on your wang? You need to get that checked out." Guy 2, "It's just your mom's lipstick from when I saw her last night." Decent comeback, but the real burn is going to come from whatever red ring condition that guy has on his eggplant. The class clown of my classmates, let's call him K, was known for notoriously teeing off teachers with crude, obscene, and insulting jokes. Well, one day, K decided to ask a 30-something-year-old teacher, "Miss, ever had a baby?" In which the teacher replied with a simple no, but that's not where it ends. K then said to the teacher with a face that only appears on the stupidest of people, "Well, I could give you one," which caused a few sniggers in class. The corners of the teacher's mouth curled into a smile, and with grace she walked up to her desk and said, "No, Kay, I don't want to adopt you," which caused the whole class to erupt into laughter and Kay to shut up for the rest of that year in English. This is still one of the best comebacks I've ever heard, so simple yet so powerful. Oh, you might be able to get away with that in math class. Maybe history. But that kid had no chance against someone who had a far better grasp of the English language than he did. Me and a buddy were at GameStop just browsing and hanging out. Employee comes up to us and asks if we need help finding anything. We told him we were just looking. This was right after the Nintendo DS XL just came out, and he starts trying to sell us on it. Me never having been the handheld gamer type, I told him I wasn't really interested. He decided his ace in the hole would be touting the newer, bigger 4-inch screen. Having enough, I responded, "Take it from me, 4 inches isn't that impressive." That was the end of his sales pitch. One time I was at a coffee shop with my good friend and I saw a dime on the floor. Jokingly, I gave it to him and said, "There, you can buy yourself a life with this." It kinda sounds funnier in my language, and he quickly answered, "I'll just buy yours and give you back the change." I definitely envy people the ability to fire this kind of thing from the hip. I think I could memorize something like this and hold it ready for the right occasion, only to still completely mess it up when the time came. In high school, there was a jerk who was a local star athlete and was pretty much the high school cool athlete bully stereotype. His attempts to pick on people were pretty lame, but people always laughed at them because he was cool, and you always laugh at what the cool kid says. He liked to do the "an 80-year-old woman called, she wants her upper back strength back" kind of jokes. He also wanted to go to Cornell on a wrestling scholarship. Not only did he not get the scholarship, he also didn't get accepted to Cornell. One day, when he was in the middle of his "so-and-so called" routines, I said, "Hey, Cornell called. Oh wait, never mind, no they didn't." Actually, I didn't think of that until the next day, and is one of my life's greatest regrets. The jerk star called, and was he a paper salesman named Andy? No, Andy got into Cornell. Douche frat guy walks into a circle of my friends at a party. Frat guy, is this the intellectual circle? My friend, not anymore. Was he just trying to be friendly? With my friend at the bar where his girlfriend was working. She stopped by our table and spouted out general complaints about having to work. My friend hands her a straw. She just stares at him blankly. He says, "Suck it up." I've used this one before on a coworker when I worked at the convenience store/deli. She was complaining about some nonsense or another, and I seized the opportunity. The look on her face was priceless. I was just so casual about it, like I barely looked up from what I was doing when I handed it to her. I don't think she even realized I was listening. Our boss found it absolutely hilarious. Sitting around a fire, drinking, telling lies and whatnot, and a female friend asks, "Out of 10, how would you rate yourself in bed?" Quick as a flash, friend of mine says, 11. Come on, be serious, who am I gonna tell? Hopefully, everyone. 11. I used to work in retail. Myself and the head of grocery had a call with a supplier where they were going to push really harsh trading terms with us in the short term because we were updating our contract to hold them more accountable for poor performance, delivery, etc. After the call, everyone was very busy discussing that we would just respond in kind later on. The head of grocery pipes up and says, "Yeah, we're gonna get screwed in the butt now, but at least they'll get crap on their wangs." When I was a high school teacher, our assistant principal was caught having an affair. She divorced her husband, but it was all over the news. A few weeks later, a kid hung a banner in the hallway that read, "I can't cheat in school, but Mrs. Blank can cheat on her husband." Cool. Pretty good comeback from a 16-year-old. Must be a pretty small town for an affair to be on the news. Extremely small town. Tune in at 7 o'clock to see who hasn't cut their grass this week. There was a guy smarting off to the new guy dating his ex. "So, what's it like inside a hoo-ha that's used material?" The new guy? "Oh, only the first 2 inches were used. The other 6 are plain sailing." My wife gets mean on vodka. Not like starting a fight mean, more like destroy all ego mean. Winding down a party, close to blackout drunk, and most of us can't even remember how the conversation ended up, with chubby friend insulting wife's lack of chest and implying she should go buy some boobs. Wife says, "But those are expensive." Chubby friend cups his moobs and says, "These did cost me quite a bit." The wife closes the night with, "Just how much do you have to spend at Burger King to get a bosom like that?" I have an issue learning spoken language, so when I started French, I was doing horribly despite how much I was working. During a parent-teacher conference, my French teacher told my parents that I was incapable of learning French. My dad leaned in and said, "Madam, there are mentally impaired children in France who are capable of learning French. He's capable of learning, you're just incapable of teaching." I was tending bar at a place in Buffalo back in the 90s. Pretty girl at the bar lifts her glass to take a drink and accidentally spills some down the front of her shirt when she gets the lip of the cup to her mouth. The 4 to 5 people around her say nothing, and without missing a beat, she laughs and says, I must be full." What's an unexpectedly well-paid job? Boiler operator. Get paid $35 an hour to play Skyrim on Switch while watching Netflix. Just have to find one that's all operator and no maintenance. Which state do you work in? It's really hard to get a job as a boiler operator, especially without a license.
I just wanted to chime in. I got hired as a boiler operator in Hawaii. Pay started at $38 an hour, and I didn't need any license or education. We did all the training in-house.
Hello? Yes, I'd like to apply to be your assistant. A job in Hawaii?
I'll be there as soon as I can. I work at home as a closed captioner broadcaster on the news. I make my own schedule and make between $35 to $65 an hour depending on the job. Large investment to get started, but significantly worth the payout.
What qualifications does your job require? Very interesting.
You have to go through a course. The course is $800 per month, and you work at your own pace. I worked while I did it at my main job, so it took me about 7 months to complete. Most people are between 6 and 9 months, though. Between the course and all the equipment, it's about a $10,000 investment to start, but very much worth it, and you make the investment back very quickly.
Keep in mind voice recognition software for CC is getting better every day.
An office job, but you're secretly on Reddit.
That's my job. Shush.
Airline dispatcher. A girl I dated many years ago I met because she was living in my town training to be an airline dispatcher. There are just a handful of schools that teach it. I had no idea what an airline dispatcher was, let alone how much money they get paid. Dispatchers at FedEx can make $150,000 per year or more. It also gives you a lot of options to advance in an airline, like being a station chief at an airline. The girl I dated had a dream to one day be Air France station chief in Tahiti. I don't know if she made it or not. I've googled this position, and to me it is not at all surprising that this is a very well-paid job. From my uneducated perspective, coordinating airline operations over an airline or entire airport seems incredibly stressful. Court reporting. Stenography is a tough skill to learn, but plenty of court reporters earn over $100K, and no college degree required. Although most court reporters will need to be certified.
There's a shortage of them too. I work as the videographer, and they're like magicians. Not many people finish the school for it though, and most of it is online now. The downsides though, they're 99% of the time not employees, so they have to supply their own insurance, pay their own transportation fees, and buy their own machines, which are expensive. They do make a lot of money though. I think it evens out for sure. I'm currently in court reporting school and holy crap is it hard, but I enjoy it. I should be finished later this year and can't wait to start working. It is very hard. And then you can get out there and feel overwhelmed for a while. But stick with it, there's such a need right now. Fun career and you can do so many different things. My mom's been a court reporter for maybe 10 years, one of them freelance. She got a job with a county judge. She gets like $60K salary and only has to go into work when her judge has court 2 to 3 days a week. She also does a lot of freelance transcribing that brings in bank too. Definitely a stable career, would recommend. I'm a stenographer and have been since I was 17. I also transcribe police interviews. In the last week I've heard 1. A man describing in graphic detail how he dismembered his teenage daughter and buried her. 2. A man detailing how he did his 7-year-old daughter a favor when he committed the unspeakable act against her. 3. An 18-year-old graphically describing her home invasion and the terrible things the intruders did to her. 4. A murder case involving the nitty-gritty of stabbing wounds. I'm squeamish and get all queasy hearing the wound details. And 5. A coronial inquiry into the burning death of a firefighter. Plot twist, I only worked 3 days last week. Technical writing. If you have the ability to take complex technical information and simplify it according to the reading audience, you can make well over $100K annually. People ridicule English degrees until they find out how much can be earned as a technical writer. Mobile crane operator. Union guys pull over $200K, and it's a trade that's pretty easy on the body. Operating engineers have a surprisingly high occurrence of back, neck, and wrist injuries. They do make a ton of money though. Knees, too. Those cabins and large machinery are not made for comfort, although I hear newer ones are a big improvement. Can confirm. OE for 10 years and have many issues with carpal tunnel, back pain, knees, and so on. I regularly worked 12 to 20-hour shifts though. It's not uncommon to run equipment that has no AC. Once ran a drill in Southern California where the heat in the cab was around 140 plus around noon. It sucked so bad. We started work at 1 a.m. to get enough time in the day. Anyone that runs equipment long enough has endless stories of misery and pain. Yet, I miss it so much. I don't know if this is true in other cities, but train and bus operators in Boston make bank. I've rarely met a higher paid, less engaged group of employees in my life, and I work in recruiting. I have a friend who's AmITheA bus mechanic. He makes so much money, he can retire at 45. Plus, if you put in 20 years, you get a pension of half your pay for the rest of your life. I fix hospital beds. Will be making $100K within my first 2 years with full benefits. I also have full control over my hours.
Power linemen make bank. Not a lot of people even know about it.
Insanely dangerous job though. 2 linemen died in our small town because some person or family didn't shut their breaker off when they hooked up their generator while they were working on it. Electricity is freaking terrifying, and sometimes even the smallest things missed can have major consequences. Just for clarity, the situation was during a natural disaster and sleep depravity was most definitely the root cause of the deaths. Linemen were working and barely sleeping for a week straight before backup could come. But the lack of sleep in itself is a major danger, as is the weather they sometimes work in, or the electricity itself. Linemen take safety seriously, but one thing going wrong can end in disaster, even something as simple as flipping a wrong switch or forgetting a single piece of safety equipment. But as far as things go, electricity is probably one of the last things on Earth you want any accident with. I drive machinery in a coal mine in Australia. I make about $170K. Even our new trainees are paid pretty well, about $48 per hour. I think it ends up being close to $90 to $100K. Easy money for sitting on your ass in an air-conditioned cab. Longshoreman. If you're a senior member of a union, you make absolute cake, $180K plus a year. Yeah, it seems anything involving very heavy machinery is a good, dependable way to make a solid amount of money. Wish I'd figured that out earlier in life. Becoming a locksmith changed my life. Well paid, and I get to help people out. I love it. Self-employed cleaning services. I don't know exactly what to call them. My parents started getting paid $35 an hour cleaning a community center to $50 from cleaning offices. My mum started it, and then my dad joined in to help her with the hours and taking care of the house and kids. Eventually, my mum got good contacts and started cleaning the offices of managers from factories, Sacramento politicians, and stuff alike. Can't express how proud I am of my mum. She turned all those crappy Hispanic cleaning lady jokes into something bragworthy. Utility lineman. There's a developing shortage nationwide due to baby boom retirements. It's well-paid base, but the overtime is fabulous. I have a couple of friends who got into this after they left the military. They all make well over $100K. Storm season brings in tons of overtime. They're all in their late to mid-20s buying houses. UPS drivers can make close to $100K if you stay there long enough. Blew me away when I first heard that. My uncle was a UPS driver in Maine for 30 years. He had to quit due to an unrelated injury, but I'm pretty sure he was making high 80K to low 90K before that.
Some of the happiest people in society too, especially if you're single.
How so?
You know the old jokes about the mailman being your dad? The UPS are those guys. Yeah, it's really good money, but there are some negatives. The worst is that you're in a truck with no air conditioning that is mostly sealed up if you're in the back. In Florida, that's freaking miserable. Also, they have polyester uniforms.
Other drawbacks include your route for the day gets put together by some fricking optimization program that parcels out minute by minute how long you're going to take. It does not take into consideration traffic jams, finding parking spots inside of a busy city. It just calculates that you drive there and then assumes you're going to find parking right out in front, and that the elevator works, and that someone is home at all, and that you're standing there with 10 60-pound parcels containing a complete weightlifting bench plus weights, and you look up the 3 flights of stairs with no elevator and you know you've got approximately 2 to 3 minutes per package. Yeah, nah, frick that. Oh, and plus you're going to be on the front lines of receiving feedback, so if anyone is getting cursed out for a bad delivery, it's you first. Ditch digger. Actually, directional boring. Guy I know is literally a ditch digger, but got into this by renting the specialized equipment just at the right time and right place. Fiber optic build-out in the 1990s. He will also say that he made it simply by being reliable and trustworthy. I do not know exactly how much he makes, but he has an 80-foot sport fisherman, probably cost $7 to $10 million, and he brought a $4 million property on a whim. I was a bathroom attendant in a fancy restaurant, made $100 a night in cash to do next to nothing. Well, they don't do nothing. Their purpose seems to be to make the bathroom experience half as convenient and 1,000% more awkward, and they always succeed. I'm pretty sure they're only in there to keep people from doing hard substances in the bathroom. Not a good sign, regardless.
Oh, and to stop people doing the deed in the stalls.
The year I got out of high school, I picked up a job at a private country club, working the bag room. When I spotted a member, I'd grab their reserved private cart from their garage and load their cubs on it that they stored in the bag room. A couple of damp towels hung on the back, pencils, scorecards, and everything waiting by the time they stepped up. Place was primarily executives and whatnot for like the major automotive companies here in Michigan. I made a couple of hundred each day in tips. During a couple of tournaments that took place, I went home with around $500 in my pocket. I took home so much each day that I kept forgetting to pick up my paycheck, which was something like another $400 each week. Late 90s minimum wage. Only part of the job I hated was using the picker to get the balls off the range. There was always some butthole trying to use me for target practice. Funeral director is a great paying job with not a whole lot of schooling. That's what I do, and I make about $75,000. If you have a strong stomach, cleaning up death and crime scenes pays very well and requires very little education.
I have a friend who did this. It's definitely paid well, but he talked about some things he saw, and I don't know if I could do it myself.
Yeah, I think I could deal with working around dead bodies, but the second any sort of horrific accidents or murder was involved, I think it would begin to get too much. There is a job in my country where you're paid something like €10,000 per mission to touch newborn chicks and determine whether they're boys or girls.
The ones near me must be really bad at their job because they seem to have like a 50% success rate when we buy chicks, so we may as well leave it up to chance.
Well, there's also that part where you put male chicks in a grinder all day. In some states, corrections officers make insane money with just a GED and a willingness to work overtime. Let me specify some states, guys. Some states.
In California, those guys can make $125K a year with little overtime.
Bartending. Some people know, but the overwhelming majority don't. If I only worked 20 hours, 2 days a week this year, weekends, I would make close to $50K. If I really tried and worked 2 solid jobs 5 days a week, I could easily hit close to, if not over, $100K. This doesn't apply to every bar or bartender. You're not going to make this kind of money at an Applebee's or a super franchised corporate establishment.
So true. I have a good friend that bartends in the Spanish club in Miami, and he said if he decided to work 4 days a week instead of working 1 to 2 days a week, he could probably make $100K a year. Hot dog vendors can earn 6 figures per year.
Buddy of mine went to Hopkins back in the day and noticed that the lacrosse games, while well attended, had no vendors. Nobody seemed to want the job, so he asked if he could. Year later, he had all of his friends bagging hot dogs the night before and was buying drinks and chips by the truckload. Sold everything for $1 and came home after every game with trash bags full of dollars. Year or so later, the school realized what a cash cow it was and took over the gig, but my buddy had pretty much paid for school by then. Collecting golf balls. Saw on the news a guy makes over $250,000 traveling around and using scuba gear getting golf balls. I mean, that's more scuba diving.
If in Florida, that's very well worth it, considering for the sole reason of fricking alligators. It's the same with underwater welding. No one's paying you for the welding part as much as they're paying you for the possibility that some tube sucks you in and you die.
I don't know if it's surprising, but one people don't think about, selling ad space on local broadcast stations. I do it and make more than most families do in my area, and I'm at a smaller market. Going into a medium one can put you well into 6 figures. I work as a lunch lady. I get school vacations off, summers off, and weekends. No nights or even really afternoons. It's amazing. I also get benefits and every year I get a raise. So between the money and the time off, the job is 100% worth it. Furry artist. Seriously, furries will shovel out so much money for commissions and then tip on top of that. If you get a big enough following, it can be surprisingly well paid. Contractors for household moving companies with 18-wheelers can gross between $200 and $400K in a year.
I'd be interested to know how much is profit considering the running costs plus insurance for an 18-wheeler, let alone the cost of an 18-wheeler.
Train driver for London Underground. Heavily unionised industry and London's dependency on the network means they've been able to demand an enviable package. High base pay, high rates over time, and travel passes for the family. Document specialist for utilities. Basically, you have to know someone to get into it, but I went from making under $40K for an office admin to $120K as a doc specialist. No college requirement, often people just get their spouses or siblings on because they've worked in an office before. As a general rule, this is terrible for anyone who actually knows what they're doing on the job, but whatever. A lot of times I'm just getting paid to hold down a desk. YouTubers who just copy Reddit posts into a voice thing and then upload it with the text in the background. And for those saying people who actually speak and make it unique aren't that bad, I agree. I still don't watch them, but I agree. My point is those YouTubers who literally just copy-paste into a text-to-speech program that they found on the internet.
Haha, this thread will probably get reviewed by one of them, and this comment will be subsequently skipped.
First of all, I've called you, second commenter, And I agree, the ones who use AI are terrible. Good thing that doesn't happen here. Other than that, no comment. I think a lot of this thread is really misleading. First, everyone is saying, I knew a guy, or I made 100k, and while I don't doubt that these are true things people are sharing, it isn't what someone else can expect to make. We should be talking about median salary or medium wage. Second, especially since we aren't talking about median salaries, almost nobody included the location. A few people did. Making 80k in New York or San Francisco is like making 30k in a small Midwestern town, according to most of the living/salary comparisons websites. The real truth is, a reasonably free market is going to adjust wages based on supply and demand, meaning that a job that is either difficult to do because it takes lots of skill, training, or education and pays well, like a heart surgeon, or if a job is dirty, dangerous, or otherwise unpleasant, and has to pay well to attract candidates, like certain fishermen, or a job whose wages are high due to external factors, like a union or lobbying body that sets wages which results in far more candidates than jobs, like my union painter uncle that makes 120k instead of the national medium of 40k. Top comment is a garbage collector in New York City. First, 100k in New York City is the equivalent of 40k in a small Midwestern town, and that wage is artificially high, resulting in far more applications than jobs, meaning odds are you can't get that job. National median is 25k. Next top is aircraft dispatcher. National median salary is 32k according to Glassdoor and Salary.com, but 40k if you believe the Airline Dispatcher Federation. Finally, a lot of people are talking about starting a business doing X, which is entirely different than working X on a salary. Median salary of a plumber is 45k in the US. They don't get the hourly wage they bill you for, and if they start doing their own plumbing business, they need to pay for insurance, benefits, and additional taxes, advertising, and a million other things on top of just being a plumber. They also have to deal with all the hours when they don't have to work. Higher risk, but higher potential reward. A successful business person running a plumbing company who has about 10 employees might make 200k or more per year, but they also lose 100k. And it doesn't really compare to a salary. Especially today with all the salary information we have available to us. A job that pays a lot, that doesn't suck, that anyone can do, isn't going to keep paying a lot. Trader Joe's managers. General managers of stores make 100 grand plus. Assistant store managers make 60 to 80,000 per year. Not bad for working grocery. Scrum Masters in software development industry. They're paid six figures for basically setting up meetings and being cheerleaders. They don't have any responsibility for delivery of work, and they don't have any work beyond what I described. My Scrum Master is a little bit more valuable than you describe, but it is an odd thing worth pointing out in this thread. He's not a useless toady. Half of the value is having a single point of contact for "what's going on?" type questions, so that the workers can work and the need-to-knowers can get the information they need to know. I'm a gardener. There's a serious lack of folks willing to do manual labor in the outdoors year-round. Most commercial properties have to maintain a certain amount of green area in our city. Hospitals and other places like that need legitimate crews to do the work with professionalism. No catcalling or spitting or swearing, etc., including bonded employees and good insurance and equipment, etc. As a result, we're in demand and we get paid surprisingly well. No university education is needed, low barrier to entry, great pay, and job security. Dog groomer. It's a weird industry though, and a skill that really has to be learned hands-on. Grooming schools can be a good start, but I know great groomers that never went to school for it, and terrible groomers that spent thousands on classes. Just being good at handling dogs is the best foundation for success. It's not the easiest job in the world. It's largely commission-based, and if you're lucky, you get any benefits out of it. But if you get enough practice to be good at it and build up a loyal clientele base in a decently affluent area, it's very good money. The haircuts I do range from $70 to $175, and I'm paid 50%, which averages out to around $30 to $35 an hour most days. Not everyone tips, but those that do usually tip $5 to $20 per dog, and because I do about 40 dogs in an average week, that's an extra couple of hundred in my pocket. So if you don't mind working on your feet all day, sustaining repetitive motion injuries, not taking lunch breaks, and dealing with insane customers, then picking the crap out of dogs' buttholes is a good living. San Francisco Poop Patrol. A 10-person team, and all they do is go around the city and clean up human feces, which is apparently a problem there. They make around $80,000 a year, plus pensions and benefits, which bring the total to about $150K. Not even kidding. Let's go scoop poop. But it's in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities in the country. Yeah, $80K is still really struggling in San Francisco. Some of those people pooping in the street make $80K a year. Underwater welding pays a tremendous amount. The only one I know personally retired comfortably in his 40s. Given how dangerous underwater welding is, I'd say the pay isn't surprising at all. Notary clerks. $30 just for signing a document and putting it in a register. The HVAC dude who used to come to my work to clean our furnaces made 6 figures and retired at 40. Now he lives in Mexico and teaches people to scuba dive. At the right place, waitressing. I got tipped $800 waitressing at a bowling alley for a team-building company party. You pick the right restaurant and just get good at it and you make bank. I know people who work at mid-range restaurants who make $80K a year, and you know they don't truthfully declare the tips they get. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.